All right. We should be ready to get started here. I think I played the outro video first. I'll have to edit that out of this. Um, all right. So it's been a while. I posted a video last week. It's an interview with Kyle Thompson. And it was a really cool discussion because we had initially intended to discuss one of Dr. Thompson's papers. And then we ended up just getting into this whole thing talking about methods and qualitative research and experimental philosophy and just I thought it was a really interesting discussion. I mean, it was my discussion with Kyle, but that discussion was back in August, and it just took me a while to get around to posting it. But I want to get back into the streaming, and there are going to be some bigger updates, but I wanted to get right into this video, go through this content, review this video. Hopefully not. I don't want to spend 3 hours on this like I did with the other inspiring philosophy video. But I'm hoping to get through this, and then I could start talking about updates and plans, and interacting with people if anybody wants to stick around and ask questions and that sort of thing. I already see quite a few people in here. So let's do a couple things here. Let's just do, first of all, I'll just do a couple checks. Is as long as my sound is coming through good, can you let me know? And then I'll play a second of the video, and then we'll just make sure that the video, because I haven't shared screen and like done the videos myself before. The last few, Danny from Phil Talk did them, and so I don't really know how the audio is going to work. So let me know how the audio is on this. Let's see. Okay, I have the wrong video up. Give me one moment. There we go. All right.
Remember that free will is intuitive. It's our starting
point. That seems a bit low
start
for
with
me.
what we intuitively believe, and the skeptic.
So I want to equalize it to my own audience.
Consciousness or free will has to provide evidence that our intuitions are wrong on this.
This is what prompted me to want to include this particular clip.
Oh my!
Christians love intuition.
Wait. I want him to see your.
Okay, I have one person say audio is great, but I just want confirmation from one more person, because I don't want to start the whole video and do all this stuff and then see that the audio from that video and my own audio is like really wildly different from one another. I hate when there's stuff like that, and I don't really have the know-how to do like some whatever type of equalization you would need to do at that point. So let's just make sure that we get off to a good start. So again, thanks everybody for being here. And while I wait for people to confirm that, let me play a little bit more of the video.
Your face.
Like skip ahead.
Individual intuition.
How does that sound?
You talk about consciousness.
It sounds good. Okay, so that's
free will is
great. Hopefully, I don't have to fix things later. Okay, so let me just say hi to everybody that's here. I see Sapir Audi. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry. So I see the triple thumbs up and a wave. So hello to you. I see Michael Ellicamp, Woo Landstream. I'm here for the start. Great. Yeah, this is the most unusual time I think I've ever done, which is 7:30 on a Monday. I had to think for a second. Is it a Monday? I don't even know what day it is anymore. We have faith because of reason. I think that's you, David Paulman. Is that right? I have the intuition that Lance is going to kick IP's butt. Well, I'm not really here to kick anybody's butt. That's not really the intention of this. It's, really because I take such a different metaphilosophical approach to how people address philosophical questions, I'm going to sort of apply that same strategy here to the discussion of free will and of intuitions more generally, and show a different perspective and to show a skeptical attitude towards these things. But, I watched this video back like a year ago, and I actually wrote 2 blog posts discussing it. And while I disagree with inspiring philosophy or Michael Jones, I don't think Michael Jones said anything like super egregious or wildly out of accord with rather mainstream views in philosophy. All right, the Mahayanist Mind says hello, folks. Hello to you as well. And then the Mahayanist Mind adds, I have the intuition that free will is nonsense, so I guess my intuition is right. So I can tell you from the outset that I take a pretty similar view about the free will debate as I do about non-naturalist moral realism, which is that basically I think the debate is a huge waste of time, that there are no substantive questions really to be addressed by asking whether or not we have free will. I think that if you just get clear what you're asking about, what you're talking about, I think the questions end up becoming not trivial, not pointless questions, and not unintelligible questions, but a variety of sort of practical questions that largely center on how we want to interact with one another, what kind of society we want to build, what laws we want to have, what reasons we have for praising and blaming people, punishing people, the criminal justice system. All of those are influenced by a range of important attitudes about human agency, human psychology, and maybe important epistemic, psychological, and empirical and ethical considerations. But I think that those can be collectively navigated without sort of treating free will, like whether or not we in fact have free will, as this sort of dialectical center of gravity around which that whole dispute sort of centers. I just think that that's a misguided way to address these questions, and that we can address them in a more broken down, sort of deconstructed, piecemeal way, where we say, okay, let's get very clear on what it is we're asking about and what we're trying to do. And in many of those cases, that doesn't make the questions easy to answer, but it does make them manageable. Whereas I think a lot of ambiguous and ill-formed questions remain intractable and seem mysterious and challenging and interesting and fascinating to people. But that's all an illusion. It's a mirage born of just not being precise with language for the most part, not being precise with clear conceptual distinctions, and really being clear about what it is we're trying to do. So that should give you a sort of preview of the kind of perspective that I'm going to take. I'll get through a few more comments and then we'll start another video. All right. So Faith Because of Reason says, I have the intuition that your intuitions don't count. So I believe, Faith, that you are critical of intuition, I think more generally. I think I am too, but not to the point where I'd say you should never use intuitions, or intuitions are totally unreliable, or intuitions are completely useless. Rather, I have more of a view that it's like, I actually don't have a big problem with seeing intuitions as a good starting point. I just think that a lot of philosophers become overly committed to certain core intuitions that they take as like, these are my central beliefs that I must defend, not necessarily at all costs, but they build the walls very, very high, and about those views. And a lot of the reaction to, say, reductive views or scientific views that say, hey, this fundamental intuition you have that you think is like super obvious or self-evident is just wrong. A lot of the reaction isn't, well, that view is mistaken and here's why. It's, that's absurd, so it's mistaken, or that's absurd, I'm not even going to entertain that sort of thing. Now, I think some philosophers might balk at that and say that that's not really what they're doing, but sometimes I think it is. All right. Okay, let's see. We have Majesty of Reason. Hey, welcome back. I was wondering where you were because I missed the comments about righteousness. So Majesty of Reason is known for saying that what is the phrase? You have to mention the phrase again so I could get it right. I never remember exactly what it is. Something about suppressing the truth and unrighteousness or something. Anyway, Majesty of Reason, that's Joe Schmid. Go check out Joe's channel. Also check out David's channel, Faith Because of Reason. They're both excellent channels. So there's good content over there. So check those out. So Majesty of Reason says, Lance almost resumed with menace. Coincidence? I don't think so. All right. Oh, Lance almost rhymes with menace. Coincidence? I don't think so. Lance almost rhymes with menace? Does not almost rhyme with menace. That's not true. All right. I think that's enough as far as comments go. All right. Let me get a drink because I think we're going to be in for a bit of a hole. It's not going to be, I hope, we'll see. If I'm up for 3 hours, I guess that's going to happen. But I really, really don't want that to happen because it's kind of late and I'll probably get too tired. All right. And this is not beer. This is tea. I know it looks like beer. You can see there's no fizz or foam or anything like that. And I am going to run out of that. I have been going through like 2 or 3 glasses of stuff when I'm here. So we'll see. Okay. So let's get into this video just to give you a bit of context. This is a 20-minute video. I'm going to go through the video. And this is a response to another video. And then I'm responding to this video, which had Michael Jones' Inspiring Philosophy on as a guest. So I'm responding to the comments from a guest on a show that's responding to someone else's show. So this is like super meta. It's a response to a response. Uh, but basically, the topic of intuitions and free will came up. I wrote a blog post on this about a year ago, and I wanted good content that I thought would be tractable for doing a kind of reaction video, mostly kind of just to get a little practice in with doing these, because I'm going to be doing more of these. I did one reviewing a discussion with Trent Horn and Destiny, and then another one with Inspiring Philosophy, Michael Jones. I never know whether to call him Michael Jones or Inspiring Philosophy or IP. I don't know. When you have, possible different names, it's difficult to know what would be best. I should stick with one and stick to it. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point. Let's get into it. So I'm going to get into this. I'm going to pause at various points and then talk about it. I can already warn you, I'm going to pause in like the first 2 seconds because there's stuff to say right away. Okay, that's enough preamble. Let's get started.
Remember that free will is intuitive. It's our starting point. We start with.
Okay, so already, and this is I think just a clip that is going to appear later there. We have free will is intuitive. It's our intuitive starting point. As you can see right away, I'm going to have some problems with that. So free will is intuitive. There's already a problem with that. And this is a problem that I haven't, I hope this is discussed more in the free will literature. But when you say free will is intuitive, I have a problem with that because it strikes me as wildly underspecified. What exactly is it that's intuitive? What is meant by free will? So the central debate in the free will literature isn't merely on whether we have free will, but on the appropriate way to construe free will. So you're typically going to have like the 3 major positions you're going to have is some type of libertarian free will. And you might say that this is, the distinctions can get carved up in a variety of different ways, but roughly you're going to have some type of libertarian free will. Then you're going to have a compatibilist free will, and a compatibilist free will basically says, look, free will is best construed in a way where even if determinism is true, we can still have free will. And the accounts of free will that are offered by compatibilists are often quite a bit different from the accounts offered by the proponents of libertarian accounts of free will. So you have this big division between libertarian and compatibilist conceptions, and then there's going to be subcategories of each of those. Those positions are very, very different from one another. And so if you say you have the intuition that you have free will, well, is it sort of an undifferentiated free will? Like you have some type of free will, either a compatibilist or libertarian kind of free will? Or is it that you have an intuition that we have libertarian free will, or that you have an intuition that we have compatibilist free will? Like, or one of the sort of, you can imagine them like mammals and reptiles, right? And then within mammals, you've got dogs and all whatever type of mammals you want to think of. And then within reptiles, you got lizards and snakes and whatever, right? So you have all those categories. And then I asked someone, hey, do you have a sense of what's in this box? And the person says, I have an intuition that, well, what is in the box? A snake? A reptile? An animal? Like what level of depth or specificity are we talking about here? A person might have an intuition that there's an animal in the box, but do they have an intuition that it's a mammal or a reptile? Do they have an intuition of a particular type of animal? So part of my point here is that when you say people have an intuition that people have free will, so what is it that they have an intuition of? Is it something so vague and inchoate and like not fully differentiated that they simply have a sense that we have some type of special kind of agency? What kind? What is its nature? What is the phenomenology of that? Would the phenomenology of any particular compatibilist account be the same? Like the phenomenology that would prompt one to feel as though one has that type of free will. Is that the same as the phenomenology of someone that has a libertarian conception of free will? I don't know. Maybe they don't feel the same way at all. So like, what is it that people are having when you say they have an intuition that we have free will? What is it that they're intuiting? What specifically? Or is it not specific? But my concern here isn't that people can't have intuitions that they have free will. A person could maybe have an intuition that they have libertarian free will, or compatibilist free will, or this particular conception of free will, or that particular conception of free will. But what you should notice about this is that it's a lot weaker of a claim to say that, hey, I think there's an animal over there, to say, hey, I think there's a dog over there, to say, hey, I think there's a German Shepherd over there. There is a sort of, a non-obvious underspecificity that works its way in to philosophical claims much of the time. As you can see, we're 0 seconds into the video, and I already have concerns. Actually, I'm looking at it, it's 5 seconds. So we're like 5 seconds into the video, and I already have something to say about this. The other part of this is that, we have the intuition that we have free will. There's another degree of underspecificity. Now, obviously, it's simply because someone says, we have the intuition that we have free will, that doesn't mean that that's not a claim that you could then unpack and say, here's what I mean by free will, here's what I mean by intuition. But I want to flag this because philosophers frequently make claims about people having intuitions that such and such, and they often are using a term like free will, where the term free will is a philosophical term of art. It's a technical term. Free will as a philosophical notion is not obviously a part of sort of everyday discourse. Now, in everyday discourse, people, at least in the United States, will on occasion use the term free will. I'm sure if I go and search around for it, I'll find instances of it. But does it have cognates in other languages? I'm not so sure that it does. And there's at least some reason to believe that there are some cases where it probably isn't present in every language. So, you have this term, and simply because it has a sort of everyday analog, it does not follow that the philosophical use of the term maps onto or matches the everyday uses of that term. So even though we could probably find instances of non-philosophers going around saying stuff like people have free will, when and if you ask those people what they mean, and there has been some empirical research, so qualitative research, asking people what they mean by that, like non-specialists, they are going to give you a variety of answers. And again, there's empirical work on this that don't necessarily comport with the philosophical use of the term. And so simply because the terms exist in everyday discourse does not mean that those terms map onto the technical concept that's picked out by that term when it's used in technical contexts. And so when philosophers say people have the intuition that they have free will, are they saying they have the intuition that they have some specific technical notion that's distinctive to philosophers? Because it's possible they do. Like, sorry, I shouldn't beg the question by saying it's distinctive to philosophers, but philosophers may use this term, a technical term, free will, to refer to one or more distinct concepts. Now, if you want to say ordinary people have the intuition that they have free will, it doesn't have to be picked out by the technical term free will. But presumably you're not saying that they use a particular word a particular way. You're making a claim about folk psychology, about how non-philosophers think, what intuitions they have. They intuit that they have something. What is that thing? And how do they know that people have it? And as you'll see, I am going to raise some questions about this. And I'll have a bit more to say about that. But I want to flag from the outset that I'm very skeptical that non-specialists, that people have the intuition that they have free will. It might seem obvious that people think that way. But then we have another question. So note that Michael Jones also says, we think that way. Let's go back the 5 seconds and play that. Listen to that.
Remember that free will is intuitive. It's our starting point. We start with.
It's intuitive. It's our starting point. So a couple things about that, and then I'll move on. Okay, first, it's intuitive. This is the sort of claim that I think that philosophers need to be criticized for every time they make this claim, because I'm not saying that you couldn't unpack that. If someone says it's intuitive, and you say, what do you mean by that? And they say, oh, I mean that most people upon reflection would have the intuition that this proposition is true, something like that, right? Or they could say most philosophers think about it this way, or most people that are meet certain sorts of psychological or epistemic conditions. Most people that are deploying some concept that are competent in the language that's being used for consideration of the concept. If it's some type of judgment that's like a semantic judgment or something like that, they're free of biasing influences. They're not caught up in pragmatic considerations. They're not misled in various sorts of ways. They're drawing on reliable cognitive processes, that sort of thing. There's some variety of conditions. Some would could in principle say, okay, when a person meets these conditions, they will have this type of judgment. That's what I'm talking about. The same way you might say that a person under ordinary light conditions, that's a certain distance from a certain object, that's not, they're not having their vision obstructed or something like that, would see an elephant, and they wouldn't see a hot air balloon or a bicycle. They would see an elephant because there's an elephant there, So it's the same sort of thing where you could say, okay, under these conditions, people have this intuition. If you say it's intuitive, you don't have to think literally everyone finds it intuitive, because of course, there are going to be some people that wouldn't find it intuitive. And so you wouldn't want to be overcommitted. And so the problem is when someone says it's intuitive, it's just not clear what that means. It's intuitive to who? And so the criticism I have of philosophers saying it's intuitive is that they're just not clear on what they're talking about. It's intuitive to who? When people say it's intuitive, they ought to specify what they mean by that. It's intuitive to who? And then you'll notice that that Michael Jones then says our and we. Who is our? Who is we? It's just not clear. And so one of my primary objections to the way that a lot of philosophers talk, this is everywhere, is that they make underspecified, unclear references to things being intuitive, or they'll say stuff like, we think this way, or that sort of thing. Now, I've been over this before, so you've all heard that before. So right from the outset, those are going to be, some concerns I have with these sorts of remarks. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, I also realized I left Joe's comment up for like a super long time. All right, let's keep going.
What we intuitively believe, and the skeptic of something, say like consciousness or free will, has to provide evidence that our intuitions are wrong on this.
This is what.
So you have that next comment that the skeptic is going to have to provide evidence of the wrong. I guess we'll get to that when it comes up in the video. But basically what you can see here is that things are being set up for a sort of burden shifting move. And the goal here is to say, hey, look, this is roughly the kind of reasoning that we're working with. A particular position is intuitive to the extent that we have some initial justification for believing what is intuitive. We are justified in the absence of defeaters, and then that shifts the onus or the burden of proof onto those who don't believe that the content of the intuition is true, to provide arguments or evidence to overcome, to override, to serve as defeaters for that sort of initial evidence in favor of the view. So roughly it works like this. Hey, you look out your window, you see a tree, you're justified in thinking there's a tree, unless someone could, present a really good case that although it seems like there's a tree, there actually isn't one. And that's why it's such a problem to not be specific about when you say it's intuitive or we think this way. What if you don't see a tree? Then you're not, the claim the tree exists doesn't take priority. So if one person sees a tree and one person doesn't see the tree, the first person doesn't get some sort of special priority, all else being equal, to claim that there is a tree unless the other person can prove there isn't. If both people are similarly epistemically situated, they are, again, all else being equal, equally justified in thinking that there is a tree and that there isn't a tree, respectively. And so one of the challenges that I think a lot of philosophers are going to need to grapple with is that they'll make these underspecified claims about something being intuitive, and they're just not specific enough about who it's intuitive to. And when someone like myself comes along and I don't find these claims intuitive, I don't stand in the situation where it's like we're both looking out the window, we both see a tree, and I'm going, yeah, but I don't think there's a tree anyway. I totally grant that under those circumstances, like I would be the person that would have to say, okay, let me go out there and like put my arm through it, show it's a hologram, something like that. Or, show it's like a cardboard cutout or whatever silly thing you could come up with. The idea there would just be that if someone is saying, hey, the two of us are standing in the same initial epistemic starting point where it does appear that something is the case. If you want to say it's not the case, the onus is on you, fine. But philosophers are not in a position to speak on behalf of how other people think or what other people's initial intuitive starting points are. And I could just not share. A lot of philosophers just operate under the uncritical presumption that there's a broad array of certain sorts of common sense views that are the initial starting points, as though there, for any given issue, there is a singular initial starting point. For morality, it's moral realism. For free will, it's that we do have free will, and so on. There's just this presumption that certain positions are the common sense position, the default position. And there's insufficient appreciation that there isn't necessarily any singular sort of univocal common sense position on a particular issue. I don't have the intuition that we have free will. Doesn't seem that way to me. So, a philosopher can balk about that as much as they want, but I am not obligated to share their intuitions. And they could get grumpy about it, but too bad. And it can be pretty frustrating, when you don't share these particular intuitions that are supposedly the common sense intuitions, because you'll sometimes have people kind of just put a degree of social pressure on you to, oh, come on, yes, you do. You're being disingenuous. People will say stuff like that. And it's ridiculous. People don't all have the same intuitions.
Prompted me to want to include this particular clip.
Oh my.
Christians love intuition.
Wait. I want him to see your face right now. Look at
Yes,
IP's
we do.
face. This is what it
Yes, we
takes to
do.
get IP to smile.
I was so happy he said this. Yes, we love intuition. This was an accidental compliment to us because philosophers love intuition. I mean, I just got my master's in philosophy. We talked about it all the time. So, I mean,
Yeah, we don't all love intuition. Some of us are pretty critical of them.
Thomas Nagel. Who else? David Brink. Is that the name I'm thinking of?
Mm-hmm.
I say, yeah. So. No, Richard Boyd is who I'm thinking of, but David Brink as well as a determinist, Greg D. Caruso. Well, note that we often argue from intuitions. I took a class with Jonathan Weinberg. We read a lot of papers on intuition. We use intuition quite often. So the reason why we appeal to intuitions, I mean, he's just sort of saying that Christians are philosophically minded. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why it might appear to someone on the face of it like, hey, look, you're talking about common sense. And maybe he says that in the video. I don't want to put it on his lips. But it's not exactly the same thing. You might have common sense opinions that were developed in you over a long period of time. Intuitions are something I think even more fundamental or basic than that.
Well, let's play a little bit more of the clip and then we can define intuitions.
Sure. Here we go.
I don't get why exactly. When you ask about objective morality, the answer to the evidence for objective morality is individual intuition. When you talk about consciousness, the answer is individual intuition. And when it comes to free will, again, the answer is individual intuition. And you heard Michael say just there, it is up to the skeptic or it's up to someone else to disprove my intuition. Now, of course, that's something that's possible to do. Again, when it comes to like, my intuition is maybe that the earth is flat because it seems flat. Well, given enough evidence contrary to that, in terms of new information, you can convince someone that the earth is indeed round, even though it seems intuitive that it is flat. The trouble here is that my intuition is that we do not have free will.
So, I think it's interesting, and this is something that I noticed about this, which is that it's not the typical route a lot of people would take, people that don't believe in free will, to say they don't have the intuition that we have free will. What you'll often see in the philosophical literature is that, philosophers will generally not be too critical of someone claiming some particular common sense position is the intuitive position. What they'll just sort of take on the burden of saying, sure, fine, whatever. It's intuitive, but it's wrong anyway. People do this in metaethics and they do this in a variety of other areas. So I think it's pretty cool to have this reaction of saying, I don't have that intuition because I don't have it either. And notice that we have people in the audience here. Now, of course, there's going to be selection effects. So it's not like I'm systematically surveying the whole world's population. And, you have this one from the Mahayanist mind. Intuitive and our starting point. I don't think it's intuitive at all. And I don't take incoherent concepts as my starting point. Same here. All right. So I have this comment as well from Annoyed Dave. Free will is worst meme. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I didn't know free will was a meme, but okay. And we have from Sapir, quote, ordinary people, in my view, probably think that if they act on their preferences and seem to make choices, then they have free will. So there's this paper from Monroe and Malley where they just basically, and they organized the responses. They coded the responses and put them into different categories. I could pull up the paper, but I believe that the sort of modal or the most common response was something like the ability to do what you want to do, which I don't think is a great definition of free will, but it does the job. Now, if that's all philosophers are talking about, that kind of sounds like a compatibilist view, but I very much doubt that what people have in mind is this view that's responsive to considerations of determinism. So, I don't think that what they're thinking really is engaged with, even in some implicit way, with the philosophical dispute. So I don't really know. I don't know that people would think under those conditions that they have free will. I think you'd have to break the question down. You could ask people, under what conditions would you be angry with people or not be angry with you? If you knew certain sorts of facts about what caused the person to have that view or to do that thing, would you still be angry with them? Then you could actually test them, not just what they would say they would do, but how they would in fact react to people, what kind of reactive attitudes they would exhibit. You could then ask questions like, what if they grew up in a society that was this way and everybody acted this way? Would they comport with that or would they resist that? So there's a variety of questions you could ask about people's expectation, like people's theoretical view of their own and other people's behavior, what they would actually do, what they predict that they would do, what they would actually do under sort of counterfactuals that we probably couldn't test, which is like, what if everybody in society was explicitly rejected free will? What would be the behavioral implications of that? I don't know. It's a tough empirical question. We probably can't test it. So there's a bunch of questions where whether they have free will, I don't even know if it's meaningful to ask that. You would have to just be specific about what it is you're saying that people believe that they have or they don't have. And we really have to be careful here not to get tripped up over and focus too much on this word or this term, really, free will. All right, we got another comment from Perk. Intuitions seem to be a function of the society and culture you're raised in. Yeah, so I think that society and culture have a big influence on people's intuitions. Now, a person's beliefs about like biology or physics are influenced by the society and culture they grew up in, but some people are going to have accurate views about biology and physics, or more, at least comparatively accurate ones compared to, say, people living 1,000 years ago. And so a person that believes that intuitions in this context, the context of free will, can provide us with reliable information about whether or not we have free will, might respond by saying, sure, society and culture represent potential distorting influences. I mean, certainly causal influences and possibly to a certain degree distorting influences, but those influences are not so overwhelming that we can't deploy conscious effort to reason, reflect, and think about things in a way that will allow us to converge on what's true. Some other people might say that certain sorts of intuitions are universal or widely shared, and so they're not really so idiosyncratic or so much a product of any particular culture or upbringing. They might, just say, yeah, everybody's got this intuition. Those are going to end up being empirical claims, and that's why I think engaging with psychology is so important for the sorts of claims philosophers want to make when they want to start by making claims like this is intuitive, or such and such is the common sense view. The common sense view for who? It's like, let's say you grow up in an isolated community and you say this is the common sense view, and let's say it's a village of 500 people. You might actually have very good reason to believe it's the common sense view within that community. Let's say it's a community of 500 people, and you go around and you're like, do you believe in free will? Yeah. Do you believe in free will? Do you know anyone that doesn't believe in free will? No. Okay, well, yeah, maybe that society, that's a pretty good reason to think your community believes in free will. But can you generalize from the way that your community thinks to the way everybody thinks? It's not so clear that you can do that. So often you'll need some sort of extraneous information to know when a generalization is or isn't justified. Sometimes you just directly obtain information about what other people think, or sometimes you have enough knowledge of sort of first principles or how foundational the issue is, where you could maybe speculate in a way that's more or less justified. So it's reasonable to think that most people in most societies would share the sort of broad outlines of similar food preferences. They're going to like foods that are savory, sweet, salty. They're not going to, can you imagine a society where the people like their food 10 times as salty as ours? I doubt it. How about no salt at all? I doubt it. But 50% more salt on average, not so implausible. So you might generally expect people to have a lot of overlap in taste preferences, but you could find a society where people are more likely to like spicy food or seafood or certain kinds of vegetables, and then other societies don't like those things. Or maybe people are flexible in how bitter the food they eat is or how sour the food that they eat is. But you might think, okay, but there's not going to be a society where they really, really, really love rotting garbage and they hate French fries. Like, that'd be super weird. So there are perimeters and constraints about which we might imagine, and we might have some justification for supposing that differences that can be due to enculturation, local environmental changes, that sort of thing. But the degree to which they're constrained and the degree to which we're justified making those inferences is in part going to be a function of available empirical knowledge about human psychology and what people are like. All right, there are more comments here. All right. Sapir is responding. I think the view Lance takes, which is also sensible to me, is that the average people without philosophical training don't have intuitions in any specific technical sense. That's correct. Yeah. So I tend to favor an indeterminacy about folk philosophical views in a broad range of cases. There are exceptions to that. I don't think it's hugely implausible to think that people have normative moral views about stuff, like that they think murdering people for fun is morally wrong. I'm totally fine saying probably most people, at least people in societies that have, well, even that one's a little complicated, but how about just they think that's bad? I'm okay with saying most people are going to think that that's bad. That doesn't seem that I'm deliberately choosing something that's not controversial because, you know, I would challenge things that a lot of people would find it really weird to challenge. And I don't think that one is, you know, super plausible. There's probably some more basic principles, like certain epistemic principles, like I think most people would agree that you probably shouldn't form beliefs about what's true or false by flipping a coin. Then again, you could probably find some societies where, or at least some individuals where that approach might be more common or more, you know, people might even do that. I mean, I say society, but really, you know, superstitions are maybe actually a pretty good candidate for something that is fairly widespread. I don't know that are there any societies where there aren't superstitions among the general population? I doubt it. I doubt that there are, but I don't know. If someone knows, let me know. All right. We got Talkin the Matrix says, are you compatibilist, hard determinist, or free willist? None of the above. I don't always take a none of the above position on philosophical issues, but this is one where I guess I would say, yeah, so I wouldn't be any of those. So free willist, it's because you're distinguishing free willist from compatibilist. I'm going to assume that you mean like libertarian free will. So your typical options would be something like compatibilist free will, which is we have free will and it's compatible with determinism. It's important to know compatibilist isn't committed to the view that determinism is true, but we have free will anyway. It's simply the view that free will, we can have free will even if determinism were true, but it doesn't require that it's true. Maybe there's specific views that do, but it's just compatibilism is that, hey, free will is compatible with determinism. It doesn't entail or require whatever, any particular relationship with determinism. Then you have libertarian accounts of free will. I'm not going to get into those or describe those much. I'm also not going to get into describing the different types of compatibilist accounts. It's just that's beyond the scope of what I could reasonably do here. So maybe that's something I could do in another video, but you probably get a good video on it from Kane B or somebody. But Kane B is great on this stuff and usually does a big deep dive that's more organized. So, and then you have hard determinism, which presumably is some type of incompatibilist no free will view, which is basically determinism is true, and because determinism is true, we don't have free will. So I don't endorse any of those views because you know, you do have another alternative, which is that, well, you actually have a couple alternatives. One would be probably closest to my view, which is that we wouldn't have free will either way. So it's not like I think free will is compatible with determinism, or that we have free will and it's compatible with determinism. Nor do I think determinism is true and it's not compatible with free will, so we don't have free will. I don't think either of those things, but I certainly don't think we have libertarian free will. So I don't fit into any of these categories. I don't think we would have free will one way or the other, whether determinism was true. So that, but part of the reason I don't think we have free will isn't because I think there is this thing, free will, that's well defined and we could have it, but we don't. Like kind of if somebody said, hey, dragons could exist, but they don't, or God could exist, but does not. That's not really the view I take. I take a view that would be more properly characterized, if not perfectly, as some type of quietistic view, where I think that the whole dispute is conceptually confused, and that with adequate specification, questions about whether we have free will sort of fragment and dissolve either into being unintelligible or ill-posed questions from the outset, or questions that are tractable and then are going to sort of bifurcate down one or another of different paths, where I would say no to some and yes to others. So if they're going to get into, like on some libertarian accounts, what I would take to be dubious metaphysical positions, I'm going to say, no, we don't have that kind of free will. If you have a really well-specified type of compatibilism, then I would say, yeah, we could have that kind of free will. But that second type of free will is going to run up into similar concerns I would have with what I take to be the triviality of naturalist accounts of stance-independent moral facts. And so in that respect, you could say, yeah, I'm a compatibilist. What I mean by that is I'm just stipulating that there are certain types of agency that humans possess, where they are responsive to certain sorts of considerations, and that they could be deterred by appropriate, deterrence. And that when a society structures itself in such a way so as to deter people that have appropriate reason responsive types of agency, but to not do so for people that wouldn't be similarly responsive, that ends up yielding desirable consequences. Very roughly, if you punish people that like deliberately intend to harm others, and they had the ability to do so and they wanted to do so and they acted on their desires and they harmed other people, but you're more mindful of, people that lack the same types of psychological capacity. So a person that was coerced into doing so, or didn't understand what they were doing, or they were, on some hallucinogenic drug, or they had some sort of compromised agency, then that person is maybe less culpable, or in some cases, depending on the severity of the action or the degree of coercion, like if a person extracts money from an ATM at gunpoint and hands it over to someone else, would we say, you're giving money to a thief? Like, well, what, they didn't really have a better option under the circumstances. So it would be, I think, ridiculous to say that they're culpable of some wrongdoing. The person's a victim in that case of an armed robbery. So, but they still chose to give the money. So, what about that situation? So when we can specify the sort of descriptively the conditions under which we would or wouldn't hold people accountable or treat people certain ways or react in certain ways, and then you say, okay, these are the principles governing when we make those attributions and when we don't. And I'm going to call that free will. Okay, then sure, we could have that kind of free will, but that's a matter of like social construction. That's a matter of us opting to use terms in certain ways in certain circumstances that we ourselves decide upon. So of course you can have that in the same way that I could like invent a game. I could create a game, create the rules, and then say the game exists. Well, that's because I made it exist. So if we design institutions, of course, those institutions exist. So if you see the implementation of free will as a certain sort of institutionally constructed means of treating people with some stipulated type of agency in a certain sort of way, well, then sure, we could have that. And so I think it'd be pretty, and that might not even be trivial. Like, sure, we probably do want something like that. I don't think we should like it doesn't matter why a person committed this action. Let's treat them all the same. That would be kind of silly. So in that sense, you might say that I'm kind of open to some types of compatibilism, maybe, but I wouldn't want to call them free will, because I think that carries too much historical and terminological and philosophical baggage. And I would prefer to drop the term free will. But the thing I would be in favor of in those cases would be something more or less compatibilist-ish. Okay. So yeah, there's a few other comments here, but let's move on with the video.
I've read books on this. I've read papers on this. I've thought about this. Pardon me. Sorry. Microphone. Distracted by my dog, who's doing some kind of business over here that I hope will not affect the stream. Thank you, Bella. Pardon me. All right. So my intuition, of course, is that we do not have free will.
Okay.
So now Michael and I are.
Just to flag a difference, I don't know that I would say I have the intuition that we don't have free will. I don't really think that I have an intuition one way or another. And but that doesn't mean that I'm like intuition absent. It's more that I don't feel like when someone says, do you have free will? It's like someone saying, what would be a good comparison? I don't know. It's a bit like someone saying, hey, do you know if Alex has the thing? Like, I wouldn't say, yes, I think Alex has the thing. And I wouldn't say, no, Alex doesn't have the thing. I'd say, what thing? What are you talking about? So it's not so much that like I hear the question, hey, do you think we have free will? And I go, I don't know. I don't feel any particular way. I don't understand what you're talking about. It's more that it's like, in the case of someone saying, hey, does Alex have the thing? Where you would say, hey, hold up. It's not that I am like totally ignorant and foolish or lack an intuition one way or another. It's that you are asking a bad question. And so my reaction is, hey, that's a shitty question. Ask a better question. What thing? Be specific. And then I can tell you, like, well, does Alex have the car? Alex is going to bring a car. And you're like, yeah, I saw it out in the driveway. Yes, Alex has the car. Does Alex have $1 million? No, I know Alex does not have $1 million, right? So the problem, is that if you don't report an intuition in these cases, sometimes people will treat you like you're being intentionally stubborn or difficult, or like the problem is you. Maybe you haven't reflected enough, or maybe you're not competent in the relevant concepts. So, you have to sit at the kids' table while the adults who do, they discuss the issue. But since you don't have an intuition, go away now. Now that's a problem. And it's a problem because the view that the question is ill-specified, and I don't, I'm not like, you're asking a bad question, improve your question. That is a completely philosophically legitimate concern to have. I mean, just imagine someone said to you, hey, have you stopped, stealing money from innocent people? Yes or no? Like it's a loaded question. It's not an appropriate question. You never started, presumably, hopefully. And so you can't say yes or no. You would say, I never started to do that in the first place. So imagine someone saying, the adults are going to discuss whether you have or you haven't stopped doing so. It's presumptive. And so if someone says, hey, do you have the intuition that we have free will? That's presumptive. It's presumptive that you have something sufficiently clear in mind about which I could anchor a definitive yes or no in the first place. And if the question's ambiguous, then I'm simply not going to know one way or the other. In a certain sense, I'm questioning whether people, like, if a person says, yes, I have the intuition we have free will, or no, I don't have the intuition that we have free will. I wonder how much those people are saying yes or no to what amount to positions about a different issue, because the question is too ambiguous to give a clear response.
Okay, that's not an intuition. That's a reasonable conclusion he's come to from studying things. Intuitions are...
Oof. Now, this is one of the places where I really took issue with what Michael Jones is saying. Michael Jones, so, the other person is saying, I don't have this intuition. I have the intuition that we don't have free will. And then look what Michael says.
Michael and I are
Okay, that's not an intuition. That's
not an intuition. How does Michael Jones know what someone else's intuitions are or aren't? That's not an intuition. How do you know that's not an intuition? There's something really presumptuous about that. And I didn't like this reply, to just tell someone that's not an intuition. If I tell you I have the intuition, so you tell me, hey, you have the intuition that X, and I say, I have the intuition that not X. It's a little weird to just tell me what my phenomenology is like. That, no, that's not an intuition. Now, it's possible that that it isn't an intuition, that a person has engaged in some sort, like they maybe had the intuition that we have free will, or maybe they had no intuition, and then they went through some inferential process and came to the conclusion that we don't have free will. And then a person is then sort of confused or misunderstanding what they themselves are saying when they say, I have the intuition that we don't have free will. But what about charitability? What about the benefit of the doubt if someone says they have the intuition that something's not the case, that they have the intuition that it's not the case? Like, it's a bit strange. It's not like there was any clear indication there. I mean, someone saying, yeah, I read stuff, that sort of thing. I mean, maybe that could lead. So, I mean, fair enough. I'll give Michael Jones his due here, which is that the comment was something like, I read a bunch of stuff, and then, I mean, let's go back and look at that specifically.
We do not have free will. I've read books on this. I've read papers on this. I've thought about this. Pardon me. Sorry. Microphone. Distracted by my dog, who's doing some kind of business over here that I hope will not affect the stream. Thank you, Bella. Pardon me. All right. So my intuition, of course, is that we do not have free will.
Okay.
So
you
now,
can pause it.
Yeah. So I'm not convinced by that. Someone saying I've read books on this, I've read articles on this, and I've thought about this. That is not a person making it clear that they're saying, as a result of that, although I started out with the intuition that we have free will, I was persuaded by what I read, and I came to believe we don't have free will in spite of that intuition. That was never articulated here. It's not clear at all that. So it's not clear that a sort of inferential process is being expressed here. That's point number one. Point number two is that a person's intuitions can change. So it could be that you could read stuff and then you could come to go, okay, well, I used to have that intuition, but now it's not simply that I no longer think that it's true. I no longer even have the intuition. So it's also the case that your intuitions themselves can change in response to reading and learning and thinking about things. And this can be just as true. Like, it's not, do you think philosophers have never changed their intuitions? That there's always the same baseline of intuitions and only your beliefs on top of those change? I don't think that that's true. So I think it's a little weird to say this just isn't an intuition. I think it's at best not clear whether or not it's an intuition. All right.
Michael and I are
Okay, that's not an intuition. That's a reasonable conclusion he's come to from studying things. Intuitions are not conclusions. They're not reasons. They're not thoughts necessarily. So here's what Jonathan Weinberg and Joshua Alexander define it in Challenge of Sticking with Intuitions Through Thick and Thin, their paper. They say, like perceptions, philosophical intuitions provide a non-inferential defeasible justificationary foundation in at least the following way. A person may appeal to an intuition as evidence without having to provide further evidence for the intuition. Okay, that's just...
Okay, so there's a few other concerns here. One is that, yes, that's one characterization of what an intuition is, but there is no singular usage of the concept of an intuition within philosophical practice. There's no established usage, and that particular usage, that it's a sort of a non-inferential belief, I guess you could say, is not a sort of canonical characterization of what an intuition is. There are a variety of other characterizations. And like, you could go, if you want to see a quick check to confirm that this is the case, simply go to the Stanford Encyclopedia entry on intuition. And what you'll see is that the article doesn't say, here's what intuitions are, and then go into detail. It basically catalogs a variety of attempts to give a characterization of intuition. What I could tell you right from the outset is that no one agrees on there being any singular correct account of intuition. Not a lot of people are working on the topic. Those that do don't agree with one another. So I think probably the most defensible position is that the term intuition, as it's used in philosophy, is polysemous. It's used to refer to a variety of different types of, I guess you could say, mental states, or maybe some people wouldn't be comfortable characterizing all intuitions as mental states, but intuitions they're not all one thing that's going to comport with a single definition. There's going to be like intuitions of various types. Some intuitions may be non-inferential, some might be inferential. Some of them might be a disposition to hold a position, whether or not one does. Some might be constituted by their, being a belief that the proposition about which one has the intuition is true. So there are a variety of different characterizations of intuitions, and it's a little strange to say, here is a characterization. But another thing is just that this description of intuition is contrasted with what conclusion and a variety of other sorts of states. It's just not at all clear that the original claim that was being made makes it clear that someone is conflating conclusion with intuition. And also, why can't an intuition also be a conclusion? It's just not clear to me that a person couldn't have. It's not clear to me that this characterization is drawing out a clear and unambiguous contrast between one set of states and intuitions, that to the extent that it does so, that it's offering any sort of canonical or like singular characterization of intuitions. I think there's enough room in the way that intuition is characterized in literature that what Michael Jones is offering is a common and completely reasonable characterization of intuition that's consistent with much of the usage in the literature, but it's not the only characterization. And someone could say, sure, okay, that's one type of intuition. That's not the kind of intuition I'm reporting in this case. The kind of intuition I have has different characteristics. Still, I'm using the term intuition. And if there were some sort of established, more uniform and consistent usage, one could then at least charge someone if, maybe they're making a mistake. They think they're having an intuition when they're not. You could, or at the very least, if the person says, no, I understand that that's how it's used, but I'm using it some other way. You could then say, okay, well, you're at least using the term in an idiosyncratic way. But I'm not seeing that from the initial remarks that were made. They just weren't clear enough that this, which is being presented as an objection, is really an objection to anything. This is a person that says, I read some stuff, I thought about this, and I don't have the intuition that we have free will. It's not clear that saying that's not what an intuition is is responding to any of the content of that in a clear and unambiguous way. It seems like it's being framed as an objection to something that was said, but nothing was said seems to me to be vulnerable to the objection. So I think this is a bit of a kind of misfire. It's reading too much into what was said and offering a criticism that is based on a bit too much questionable extrapolation. All right, let's see if there's some more comments before we move on. Some of these I don't really want to address, so I'll address this one. So Perk says, sounds kind of like a non-cognitivist view of free will. I don't know quite what you mean by that, but I don't know. I want to say no, but I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, so non-cognitivism is typically going to be a view that involves very heavily a semantic thesis about the meaning of claims. In meta-ethics, this would be that you could say like atomic or first order moral sentences like murder is wrong or stealing is wrong or helping people is good or whatever, that those statements are not propositional and they instead express some sort of non-propositional content, like an imperative, like don't murder, don't steal, or an expression like murder, like you just don't like it, like murder with some growling. You know, that's murder, you know, that would be a non-cognitivist account. I don't know how that would apply in the free will cases. So it doesn't seem like that's a sort of an appropriate fit, but maybe you have something specific in mind. Maybe there's free will non-cognitivism and I'm not aware of it because this isn't my area of specialization. You never know. I don't know. Well, I say you never know. I never know, but someone else might. All right. Igor Selovanov says, hey, Lance, random question. Have you seen the movie Arrival? And if so, what's your opinion from a philosophical perspective? I have seen it. And let me pull this up real quick. Give me 1 second because I want to get the name of the book and everything. That's right. So I believe that is from a volume from Ted Chiang called Stories of Our Lives and Others. Let me look up the table of contents just to confirm that. If someone in the audience can confirm, that would help too. 1 second. Where is the table of contents? It's got to be in there. All right. Well, I'm pretty confident it's in there, so I'm going to run with my presumption that it is. So it's one short story in the set of short stories from Ted Chiang called Stories of Our Lives and Others. That set of short stories is one of my favorite science fiction series that I've ever read. And I've read, I can't even count. I don't know. I have 400 or 500 books on Audible, probably at least 100 of them are sci-fi. I don't know. And then that was after I got Audible like 10 years ago or so. And so then all the reading I did before that. So a lot. So, you know, a lot of the classics like Arthur C. Clarke and that sort of stuff. This stuff, it's newer material. It's not stuff from like the 1950s and stuff. This is stuff that came out a few years ago. And these stories are absolutely kick-ass. They're super, super awesome. And there's another one that came out a few years ago called Exhalation, I believe. I'm going to confirm again. I always feel like I'm going to get stuff wrong. Yeah, it's totally called Exhalation. And it's like at least as good. I think I liked it about as much as Stories of Your Life and Others. Exhalation is just super duper awesome. So I would say Arrival, I don't even know if the story itself, I think the story itself might have been called Story of Your Lives and Others. Anyway, I don't think it has the same title, but it's one of the stories in there. It was actually, out of both volumes, my least favorite short story. So there's like, I don't know, 20 other stories, and I like every single one of those better. So I think it's a great movie. And so I can't even fathom the other ones being movies because I think I would just lose my mind with how awesome they are. These stories are just super cool. I can't even get into them. I don't want to give spoilers. And I couldn't remember any of the detail. Like I need to go back and re-listen to them again because they're just so good. As far as understanding it from a philosophical perspective, I don't even know if I could begin to address that. And especially not without giving away too many spoilers. What I will say for those who haven't seen the movie, a big part of it is about language. So I guess I could say this. So Arrival, aliens show up and they have it's challenging for them to communicate with people from Earth. So they send someone to try to communicate with them and the movie takes off from there. That's only part of the central theme of the movie. There's a big part having to do with, I don't want to give away too much. Okay. It gets really personal. It's emotional in a really, really good way. It's a really cool movie. It's a kind of movie that like I think ages well too. I think when I saw it, I was a little disappointed because like I actually saw the movie before I read the book, and I wanted to see more like robots and explosions. And I'm really into like lasers and like you know, um, and you don't get that in this movie. Okay, that's not a spoiler. So you don't get that. It's more philosophical, the movie. But it was more that it would like didn't meet my expectations. You know, like if you go into a movie and you want to see like you think you're going to see some like awesome fights, and then it's just people having conversations. You're kind of like I wanted some punching and kicking, and I didn't get it. But you know, in retrospect, no, it's a cool movie. As far as its implications go with respect to language, without giving stuff away, I think it raises really cool questions about the degree to which language shapes the way that you think. And, you know, there is this whole like Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that has been thrown about in the literature for a long time. I don't think like the movie really takes that and runs with it to an extreme that I think is super implausible. And so I don't think language is really going to make it like impossible to think certain concepts or render you total. I mean, unless we're talking like a really weird hyper constrained language, but like natural languages that humans have, I don't think that they make things like radically inconceivable or totally alter the way that people think. But they do make, I think, they do sort of they don't function like walls towards certain thoughts. They function like roads. And those roads lead to some places, but not others. Now, more quickly, but that doesn't mean you can't go off-roading and go through the woods and get to some other place. So a language that lacks specific words to refer to specific concepts, you may notice like certain language, like we'll borrow terms from another language because that language will have a particular word that will convey a particular concept so beautifully and so perfectly that there's just no, like you run into cases where it's like, yeah, we can't really translate this. Or I could tell you what it means in like 8 sentences and it kind of captures the vibe, but you really kind of have to become a member of the culture or really spend a lot of time to like grok it, you know? So, and that grok itself comes from another science fiction story where you run into a similar sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think the road versus wall analogy kind of holds up, which is that languages might pave the way towards facilitating or rendering more easy and more efficient certain ways of thinking relative to others, but it's not going to sort of bar you. And it's not going to, I think, open up whole new cognitive vistas that are completely inaccessible. I'm totally open to being wrong about that, but I don't think I've been given any particularly good reason to think that that's the case, at least with respect to like natural languages among humans. So maybe there are languages that like super advanced artificial general intelligence could speak that humans just don't even have the cognitive capacity to speak. Like, I don't know, some some binary language. And like some where it's like, you know, it would require like a massive supercomputer to get one sentence across in this language. And for humans, it would take 1,000 years for us to articulate it. But a supercomputer could do it with no problem. And so maybe they have languages that allow them to do things that we couldn't do. Although I don't know how much that would be a byproduct of the language and not just other features of their cognition. But I don't know. That's getting into speculative territory, and I don't really feel like going there. Okay, so, but I hope I did something for that question, even though it's a big kind of a digression. So how dare you add to digressions? Okay, let's play a bit more of the video, and then I'll get back into the comments.
What intuitions are. I like the way Ruth Schaefer Landau, again, who's another atheist, defines intuitions. He says this: intuition is not a belief, it's not a judgment or any other dogmatic statement. It's not a tendency or a disposition to endorse a proposition. It's not a guess. It's not a hunch. It's not a supposition. It's not a faculty of any sort. Neither is it infallible. Neither is it epistemically justifiable or unjustifiable. It's a conscious experiential state that has content.
Okay, so in this case, this particular characterization of an intuition, it's not a disposition and it's not a belief. It looks like it's a certain type of phenomenology. Maybe it's a certain type of conscious experience. Let me roll it back just for a second, just to get this into that. And again, we're getting yet another characterization of intuition. So I just want to flag there are a bunch of different characterizations of intuition. Not everybody uses them the same way. There's even some dispute in the philosophical literature about whether or not people actually, like philosophers, actually use intuitions as evidence for their theses. I think some of those claims are a bit strained, but the proponents of those views, I think, do make a good point when they criticize a lot of sort of blanket presumptions about what it is people are doing when they're constructing their arguments. I think a lot of times there's this sort of a retrospective amnesia that a lot of contemporary philosophers have because of the uptick in the use of the term intuition, that we just sort of retrospectively think everybody's using intuitions for everything all the time, everywhere. And we need to be careful about that, because in many cases, if we really carefully examine arguments, there are at least junctures where they may not be appealing to intuitions. They might be doing something else, which isn't to say that there isn't something intuition-like that's often going on in a lot of these cases.
It is content. Okay, so in a nutshell, what he's trying to say is intuitions are just sort of like the way we sort of act. Okay, we don't act as if determinism is true.
Okay, now that's a little strange. Intuitions are the way that we act. Let me take that back a little bit.
Justifiable or unjustifiable. It's a conscious experiential state that is content.
It's a conscious experiential state. Huh. Experiential state. Sounds like a phenomenological state or qualitative state, but
content. Okay, so
wait a moment.
In a nutshell, what he's trying to say is intuitions are just sort of like the way we sort of act. Okay,
now they're the way we sort of act. So a conscious state and the way we act are different. They're different things, I would have thought. I mean, unless you're going for like a, some kind of functionalist view. I don't know. Something about this characterization seems a little strange to me. Even then, I would say that there's a difference between me like lifting my arm and having a conscious experience of lifting my arm. And even if the conscious experience has served some sort of functional role, it's not like literally identical with lifting my arm. How we act, those are different things. So now I'm a little confused about what an intuition is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be the conscious state or an action associated with the conscious state, or it's both, or is it one or the other? Are these two? This seems a little weird. It seems like the definition just changed in the middle of characterizing it. I don't know. Something strange about that.
We don't.
I should also say I've never heard of anybody characterizing intuitions as how we act. I would be curious to see where Schaefer-Landau says that.
Act as if determinism is true. Okay.
And then that's another one. We don't act as if determinism is true. What? That's a really weird claim. Listen to that one again. So let's set aside, for at least for a moment, the intuition stuff and just entertain this particular claim.
Of like the way we sort of act. Okay, we don't act as if determinism is true. Okay,
hold on. How would we act differently if determinism was true, or as if we believe determinism is true? Why would we act differently? Well, I mean, I guess that's another under specificity. Let me look at the claim a little more carefully.
It says intuitions are just sort of like the way we sort of act. Okay, true. Okay,
so there's an ambiguity here. There's a difference between us. We like the claim that just literally interpreted, we don't act as if determinism is true. Now, if determinism were true or not, that may or may not influence how we act if we're not aware of that fact or we don't believe that it's true. And so it would be helpful to disambiguate the difference between how people would act or not act if determinism were true and how people would act or not act if they believe determinism is true. We're only given the former claim, and I don't know if it was the latter claim that was intended. If it's the latter claim, that might have some psychological impact on us. The fact that we believe determinism is true, again, notably, whether or not it's true could influence our behavior. But since that wasn't explicitly stated, I'm inclined to go with the former claim that we don't act as if determinism is true. And that I find rather puzzling, because why would we act any differently if determinism wasn't true, or it was true? Like what would be different about our behavior? It's not obvious to me that there would be any differences. Like if our behavior is determined, why wouldn't we? I don't know. I guess let's just see where that goes.
We act as if we are conscious agents, that we are making our own choices, and that's how we live our life. We don't have to.
Okay, so I don't believe in free will, but I think I'm a conscious agent and I make choices. The denial of free will is not the denial that we're conscious or that we make choices. People that think we don't have free will don't have to deny either of those things. Again, I want to be careful here.
Our own choices, and that's how we live our life. We don't have to think about that. We just sort of do that.
Okay, I bring it back, and then it's like doesn't go back far enough. So
okay, we don't act as if determinism is true. Okay, we act as if we are conscious agents, that we are making our own choices, and that's how we live our life. We don't have to think.
Yeah, so that just sounds strange. Yeah, so not believing in free will doesn't mean you don't think you're a conscious agent and that you don't make choices.
About that, we just sort of do that. Beliefs, Schaefer Landau notes, are formed either by accepting or building on intuitions or rejecting intuition. It seems like Paul has rejected his intuition of free will. And
there we go. You see? So when we go all the way back to the earlier part, look at the presumption here. This is simply a presumption. Look at this.
Rejecting intuition. It seems like Paul has rejected his intuition of free will.
It seems like he's rejected his intuition of free will. The presumption is that the person initially had the intuition that we have free will, and then they rejected it. You see the presumption that the person had an intuition of free will and then they didn't? This is sometimes what will happen to me, that people will say, well, you had the intuition that moral realism is true, and you rejected it because of your theoretical commitments to whatever that led you to be an anti-realist. No, I didn't have the intuition that moral realism is true. I never had that intuition. I never had the intuition that, like, you give me some concrete case that it is objectively wrong or sense independently wrong in that case, which would entail moral realism. I never had the intuitions to begin with, as far as I can tell. And even if I had them before, it's not like I have them now, but I reject them. I don't have the intuitions. And here you see someone simply declaring what another person's intuitions are. How does Michael Jones know what someone else's intuitions were, like, in the past? Like that it could be true, but why assume that it's true? It's strange. But notice the presumption here. And I think that's one of the missteps that can occur when someone goes around saying, like, free will is intuitive, is that instead of saying, I find free will intuitive, or most people find free will intuitive, you can often make the mistake of treating the position as this position, like everybody starts in this position, or more or less everybody. And so if someone doesn't believe in free will, they're doing it or once had that intuition, and that they had to somehow purge or override that intuition. But that is a psychological story that may or may not be true. It's going to be an empirical question whether it's true. And you're not entitled to presume that it's true. You would need some reason to think that it's true. So, it's a little strange. Maybe there's some background or context where, the person that Michael's responding to once claimed to have the intuition and then no longer does. But I didn't hear that in the video, at least. So I don't have that context. So if there is that context, then I apologize. Maybe there's background information, but if there is, I don't know why it wouldn't be brought up. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and to address some questions. But I think that I should just say is a misstep, to just presume that a person had an intuition. Yeah, assuming that it's a presumption here and that there isn't background information that would justify the claim that the person had the intuition and now doesn't. But if that information isn't really available, then this is just a presumption that I don't think is justified. Okay. Oh, this is funny from Sapir. Quote, I think this is intended to be like characterizing a view, that not something that Sapir is endorsing. Quote, if your intuitions don't correspond in a truth-making relation to my intuitions, then your intuitions are not intuitions. Yeah, I have had, end quote, I have had some people seem to characterize my view as that because I don't have the realist intuition, I just don't have intuitions. And like, it's almost like they think that I have some sort of like conceptual deficiency, or not something like that. Literally, people will say, yeah, I have some apparatus where I have intuitions. Those intuitions lead me to think realism is true. You don't have the intuition. And then they seem to infer backwards from that fact that I don't have the apparatus. And it's not that I think they have an apparatus that gives them intuitions and I don't, nor is it that they have an apparatus that gives them the intuition and I have an apparatus that gives me contrary intuition. It's that I don't think they have an apparatus. Much like, and so I don't know when they're saying they have the intuition, something psychologically interesting is going on there, but I don't think that they stand in a better epistemic relation to the truth than I do, simply because they report intuitions and I don't. And so this appeal is a kind of it's a kind of stolen epistemic asymmetry, where people that report having intuitions will act like they're in a better epistemic position than people that don't have those intuitions or don't have intuitions about the issue at all, or even skeptical of intuitions in general. So I think a lot of this is a kind of epistemic posturing. A lot of it rests on some very shaky, underspecified uses of terms like intuition that are not well developed, or not super technical, or not well cashed out psychologically. Notice that when Michael Jones characterizes intuitions, it seems like a moving target. It kind of moves between a variety of claims. None of them are very specific. None of them are very clear. And some of them seem to be in conflict with one another. So, you could listen to this whole thing, and I don't know about my audience, but I don't know what Michael thinks an intuition is still. I just don't know, because the characterizations seem to be potentially at odds with one another. So I don't know what an intuition is still. So if people studying the topic it's not entirely clear what intuitions are supposed to be, how the hell is anyone else supposed to know what they're talking about? And it seems a little premature to go around talking about what intuitions non-philosophers have if philosophers can't even figure out what the hell they're talking about. And they don't agree with one another when they are clear about what they're talking about, which is extremely rare. They're almost never clear about what they're talking about. So it's a really weird situation that we're in, where we're using terminology in a way that's super duper sloppy, super duper underspecified. There's no canonical account of the terms in question. Nobody agrees on anything. Very few people in the field actually study this stuff. The people that do study this stuff are still embroiled in ongoing, super intractable debates. They take radically opposed positions. Some of them even claim people don't use intuitions at all. So they make radically different characterizations of what intuitions are. They have radically different conceptions of the evidential role that intuitions do or don't play in philosophy. And so that absolute fucking chaos that we're stepping into, sorry for the kids, if kids are listening. Why would kids be listening to this for the profanity? We step into that chaos, and we're supposed to say, this is an intuition, this person has the intuition, or we're confident enough about what intuitions are that we could just say this is the intuitions that people in general have. I don't think so. There is so much going on here, psychologically speaking, that is not being supported by available empirical evidence. I mean, there's a reason why experimental philosophy, taking empirical methods and applying them to historically philosophical questions, usually using the methods of the social sciences and often with the explicit aim of, understanding the intuitions, quote unquote, of non-philosophers, why that field arose in the past 20, 25 years or so. It arose to address these sorts of questions. That's an ongoing enterprise. And it's an enterprise that has received a lukewarm reception within the field, with some people heralding it and loving it, some people hating it, and a whole lot of people ignoring it. And we have not reached a resolution there. The field is changing and evolving. It's a relatively small field to being in a position to make confident claims about what intuitions people have or don't have in any particular area. I mean, maybe there's a few areas, but even there, you're going to get big cross-cultural differences. And that itself is a current dispute with, Nobe on one end and Mashry and Stitch on the other, about the degree of cross-cultural convergence in philosophical intuitions. How much, when you look across different societies, people share the same or have different philosophical intuitions. I tend to lean more on the side of people having quite different intuitions, and the Mashry and Stitch position. I think Nobe points to some interesting similarities and convergences, and it shouldn't be surprising if there's similarities and there's differences. But just the point there is that with it being that up in the air, and there being enough evidence to raise serious questions about whether or not there is, for any given thing where you say this is the intuition that we have, a lot of times people are going to be talking about themselves, the cultures that they're from, typically like weird or Western cultures. And they're just not going to be in a good position to say that these are the intuitions that people in general have. So you're going to have a massive generalizability problem with anecdotal appeals to intuitions. We can't even get the matter resolved with systematic, high-quality empirical evidence conducted within the United States. People think they're going to get it done with anecdotes. No way. Oh, right. Let's see. I see a bunch of people talking to each other and saying some stuff. Cool. Thanks for that. I'm going to get caught up. I'm about 10 minutes behind. All right. Some people saying some critical stuff. So Perk says, did I misunderstand? Is he saying intuition is both an action and a conscious state? I'm genuinely not sure. So I think I'll just give the benefit of the doubt that Michael was like working towards a particular characterization. Or it could be that just to speculate, maybe it's that because everybody has a certain sort of conscious state, and that conscious state is that they have free will, that conscious state is like causally efficacious, and it leads to certain kinds of action, and then the action that it prompts is the actions that would lead one to say that we act as if free will isn't true. So it could be not that the intuition itself is the action, but rather that certain kinds of conscious states reliably produce certain kinds of actions, and so they're sort of a causally paired in some sort of reliable way. I don't know. It would be helpful if Michael, would have a conversation and talk about these different characterizations of intuitions in the literature and get clear on what he himself thinks is a good characterization of what an intuition is, and maybe clarifies this question. Do keep in mind this was a case of a sort of a recorded discussion. It's not one where like one has a script in front of them. Look, I'm doing a live stream. I say goofy stuff. I probably made several mistakes already. I'm not always prepared to talk about every topic. If someone asks me a random question about some topic, you'll see that I goof up. Sometimes I say things that are wrong. And so for this sort of thing, Michael's not working with a script. So I think it would be reasonable to say, this is a difficult topic, and it would be challenging to expect someone to be able to give a clear, straightforward, and perfectly consistent characterization of intuition. So I think, I can be critical, but not in a way where I'm like, this is a big mistake, how dare you? It's more like, there's a lack of clarity here that could be clarified with further discussion. Okay. All right. Looking through. Oh, I didn't even notice this. Facundo Cisa says, we don't act as if the earth is round. LOL, what? Yeah, like, it's a good point. And, look, I'm not an astronaut. I'm not trying to like land on the moon. If I did, then I would probably act like the earth is round, because that would be pretty important for my calculations. But most everyday behavior, it doesn't make a difference one way or the other, whether one thinks the earth is round or the earth is flat. I'm not attempting to circumnavigate the globe in a boat. I'm not. So most of people's everyday activities, whether or not the earth is flat or round or a Mobius strip or whatever, is just totally irrelevant to most action. So I don't know that people actually do, for the most part, act as if the earth is round. I think they act in a way that's indeterminate. And I actually think that serves kind of my point. I don't think that people's typical actions, they act as if they have free will or not, or that they act as if determinism is true or not. It's more that people's actions are just indeterminate with respect to these sorts of considerations. I don't think people would act any differently one way or another, at least in most cases. James Apperson says, he seems to be meaning my stance is everyone's default. Yeah, I don't want to attribute that because it does seem uncharitable, but it does kind of seem that way. I don't know. I don't know what Michael would say if we had a discussion where I said, yeah, I don't have the intuition that we have free will. And Michael said, oh, well, no, you do. That what you were reporting, like your intuition that moral realism is false, that's not an intuition. That's going to be a big problem, because like I study this topic professionally. I'm not going to have a lot of patience with someone telling me what my intuitions are. I will tell them what my intuitions are, and I don't have those intuitions. And I can tell someone what my intuitions are on this topic, and it would be really weird for someone to try to tell me what I think on the matter. I'm not saying Michael hasn't done that. We haven't spoken, but it would be a weird exchange where I would just say, no, I don't think that way about these sorts of things. I never thought that way about these sorts of things. I'm a sort of, you could say, sort of natural anti-realist, natural free will denier. To me, these are very natural positions. And there's no time I recall where I had to be like convinced of these positions. It's the same thing with a lot of my philosophical positions. It's not like I just went around constantly having all of the sort of stereotypical common sense intuitions, and then I was like reading stuff and then constantly overriding them. It's that I never had any inclination for a lot of what philosophers would claim are the common sense positions in the first place. And that is actually part of what drove me to study philosophy. So, when I encountered, well, whatever, I'll just say something about this. So one of the sort of transformative experiences for me was when I was taking an intro to ethics course and I came across the switch and footbridge dilemma, the trolley problems. And, most people in the switch dilemma have the intuition, yeah, you should pull the switch. And then in the footbridge dilemma, they have the intuition that you shouldn't push the person off the bridge. And, when I encountered that footbridge case, it's not like I was just like, yeah, push him, and like I had no empathy for the person or I wouldn't feel bad about it. It's more that I didn't have a distinctive reaction one way or the other. It was more that I noticed a couple things. I noticed the obvious fact, because it's stipulated that if you push the person to their death, and in this scenario, there's a train headed down the tracks, just so you're not worried that I'm like just talking about casually pushing someone to their death. The scenario is one for most people know about this, I think, but whatever, I'll just say train headed down the tracks. It's going to hit 5 people. There's nothing you can do to stop the train other than, and you're the only person around that can do this. You could push a person off the bridge. They'll fall to their death. Their body will stop the train from hitting the 5 people. You'll save the 5 people from getting hit and killed by the train. So your options are push a person, killing them to save 5 people, or let the train hit 5 people and kill all 5 people. So it's kill one person or allow 5 people to die. Most people in the psychological literature, a lot of research conducted by Josh Breen, would say, yeah, I'm not going to push the person. I wouldn't do that. Now, when I encounter this, like in a real world scenario, I don't think I would push the person. I think I'd be like, I'd hesitate. I'd feel awful about it. I'd be like, now these are really artificial circumstances, because a lot of, like in real world circumstances, you probably wouldn't think one body would be sufficient to stop a train. But, you could just imagine a scenario where, killing the one person would save 5 people. I don't know if I could or would be able to do that, even if I thought it was the morally right thing to do. But I don't have this like spider sense that it is morally wrong to do it, or that it's morally permissible to do it. I don't have a strong sense one way or another. I noticed, and I'm talking back when I was like an undergraduate, I noticed that this was an interesting situation where I was of two minds. I was conflicted about it. Actually, Josh Knobe has a cool paper on this, where Josh Knobe says, hey, one of the interesting things about philosophers is that they have conflicting intuitions about things. You can often be of two minds about something. And that's kind of what my reaction to that was. And so that was part of the sort of transformative experiences that I had as a student that led me down the path of studying what I study, both philosophy and psychology, in particular moral psychology. What I noticed is that my experience with intuitions was more complicated, and that there was this social pressure to express a particular intuition. And what I suspect is that philosophy socializes and inducts people into a distinctive and idiosyncratic way of thinking, which is that when one is presented with cases, one is expected and one trains themselves to have categorical judgments that fall within some sort of pre-selected, like it's almost like proper philosophy presents one with thought experiments, presents you with a multiple choice set of responses, and you are to have one of the responses to that multiple choice question. You could pick A, you could pick B, maybe there's a C or a D. But there is typically no E, none of the above. There's typically no, screw you, this isn't a multiple choice question. It's actually like a continuum. It's not categorical. You don't really typically have those options the way that philosophical problems are framed. And when you do say, you draw a little note and you say like, Professor, I think the correct response isn't in these categories, people react often with incredulity, hostility, stupid, or you don't really understand the issue. If you understood the issue, you'd know it's got to be A or B. And philosophers try to put people in boxes. And when I experienced this as an undergraduate, my reaction was, fuck you. I'm not going to go there with the profanity. I guess this is a profanity stream, whatever. Don't put me in a box. I will not go in your box. I don't think you should push. I don't think you should push. I think this is a complicated situation where there's a bunch of questions to ask about human psychology and what we're in a position to know and all these sorts of things. Now, my thinking at the time, I'm sure, was cruder than that, and that partly what I'm giving you is a kind of reconstructive and very positive retrospective narrative account where it paints me in a really good light. It could be that I was just confused at the time and I was like, something funny here. I don't remember exactly. But that led me down the path of recognizing that I frequently don't share philosophical intuitions. And I should say, I experienced constant pressure to express or conform to the intuitions of other philosophers. So when I expressed, like, I don't think that there is this thing, qualia, I don't have qualia intuitions, I had people tell me, yes, you got to think that. There's no way you don't think that. It's so obvious, or you must think this, or various sorts of skepticism. And maybe that is justified if really most people's experiences is that most people have these intuitions. But I never backed down. I didn't have those intuitions, and I wasn't going to have somebody tell me what my intuitions were. I didn't feel the way, so what am I supposed to feel? Tell me about this phenomenology that I'm supposed to be having. And, I would get descriptions for people. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have that. And then I have people go, oh, come on, you got to. No, I don't have it. You got to. No, I don't have it. And I would go in, get in those loops, the yes, no loops. And I never relented, and I just was not going to conform. Now, again, a lot of these interactions, I think, were very well-meaning. People were, these were fun conversations where people learned a lot from one another, myself included. But what I could say is that maybe I just have a kind of antisocial stubbornness, but I just didn't have other people's intuitions. And I've always been sort of recalcitrant and stubborn about this. And I respond very badly when someone says, this is the default intuition that we have, and so you have it. No, I don't. And you will not tell me what my intuitions are. And I think it's super duper rude when people do that, when they try to tell other people what they think. Imagine I went around saying, it's intuitive that God doesn't exist. Everyone knows God doesn't exist. It's so obvious. That would just be seen, I think, as obnoxious. And if I said, look, most atheists, the proportion of philosophers that are atheists is actually higher than the proportion that are moral realists. Should I go around saying atheism is intuitive? And we experience reality as though there is no God. We act like there is no God. That would be a silly thing to say. But if someone said, no, I really believe in God, and I think it's actually pretty obvious that God exists, and I've always had a sense that God exists, you know what I would do? I would take them at their word. Unless I had some really good reason to think that the person is super duper mega confused or lying or whatever. I would need some solid concrete evidence. Otherwise, I take people to be operating in good faith. And so if I say I don't have an intuition and I study this topic, I expect people to accept that at face value. And if they want to tell me I don't have the intuition, fine. I'm going to expect them to furnish some damn good reasons why I don't even know what I myself am talking about or what I myself think. And when I've challenged people on that, I've never gotten a good explanation. It's typically someone just being incredulous or insisting I must think what they think that I think. And it's just, that doesn't fly with me. And I think that people, anybody that's really dug into the psychological literature and has seen just how different it is for, different people's ways of thinking actually is, I think it would be hard for that person to maintain confidence that if they run into somebody, that person must share their intuitions. So I hope Michael would grant that if someone said, no, look, I really thought about this and I don't have those intuitions, that he would say, fine. And then go from there in the conversation. I hope it wouldn't stall out at someone just saying, yeah, no, you have to have the intuition or you do. Okay. Yeah, this is a funny response here. Moxie C says, I have the intuition that you don't have that intuition. Yeah, what if you start pulling moves like that, like meta intuitions? I have intuitions about other people's intuitions. You could. So, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You get these responses. Look at these responses. I act entirely as if determinism is true. And then this other one that says, yeah, I absolutely act as if I'm a determinist. You know what? So do I. I act exactly like as if determinism is true. I'll play my hand. I think determinism probably is true. And so, yeah, I act like it's true, which is to act exactly how I'm acting now. I don't think the existence of free will would make any substantive difference to what I did or how I acted or what I thought or how I felt or anything. So, yeah, I think it's one of the reasons I reject free will on sort of pragmatic and quietist grounds as just empty. It's truth. But were it to be true, it would make no difference. So I don't even know what it would mean for it to be true. So let's see if I could get caught up on the comments. Interesting comments here. Like the Mahayana's mind says, like my preference for steak is determined by my prior consumption of and access to steak. Right. So when you reflect on your actions, you can note the causal chain that led to them. Sometimes you won't know what it is. Sometimes you will. But like nothing about my decision to do this stream right now feels to me like I could have done otherwise in a way that's exempt from the laws of physics or something. Maybe that's not what everybody has in mind by free will. But I don't feel like I'm a soul that could just act outside of causal necessity. I think this is just as much subject to the laws of physics as my computer. So I'm a machine, and I'm not any freer than my computer. And if you want to say, okay, well, what about in compatibilist respects? Like, we wouldn't praise or blame your computer, but we might praise or blame you. And you might think it's okay to praise and blame you, but not your computer. Fine. Then maybe I have that kind of, quote unquote free will. But that's the kind I'm okay with. I'm okay with that kind of free will, the compatibilist free will. That doesn't bother me too much. All right. Perk says, sorry, I ignore my non-cognitivist question. I was just trying to make sure I understood what you're saying. Yeah, no problem. And I don't mind questions like that. I'm going to say a lot of goofy things in a stream. This is not a prepared video, so no worries. All right. I'm just looking through the comments to see if there's good ones to post up here. If I don't, I could just skip over them. There's just a lot, and I want to get caught up. So sorry if I don't get every single comment. If I posted all the comments, we'd be here all night. Also, I was worried about this going for 3 hours, and now it seems like it is because I'm not even 5 minutes in, and I'm at an hour and a half. So I'll probably have to pick this up and do a round 2, which I guess nobody is really going to have a problem with. I feel like this is cool. I mean, one thing to say is at least it's not metaethics. I will make references to moral realism, but that's not what we're talking about today. All right, I'm still going through here. All right, we have Roberto says, hey, Lance, first time catching you live. Thanks for what you're doing, though I disagree with a lot of your views. You always bring up interesting valid points. Thank you. Welcome. I hope you'll stick around. I don't want this channel to be a big echo chamber just for people that agree with me. I really, really, really want people to disagree with me, especially if they say critical things, hopefully politely. I don't like when people are big jerks and are nasty and snarky and snipey with their remarks. I don't like that, but I do like challenging questions and pushback. James Apperson says, no mind could have libertarian free will. It's an irrational gibberish concept when examined up close. So I agree. And it's one reason I don't think ordinary people have a concept of libertarian free will. I think this is a philosophical invention, and that it's just a goofy idea, or almost like a pseudo idea that was created by philosophers. And I just don't think that ordinary people go around with, by ordinary people, that's like a term sometimes used in the literature. I mean people without a bunch of training in philosophy. I don't think that they have a lot of these technical concepts that I think are distinctive to philosophy, bouncing around in their heads. I think, and I think philosophers often, basically, I think the field trains people to all these categories and distinctions. They end up using terms and concepts in ways that I think are conceptually confused and super duper metaphysically loaded. And then they sort of project that onto the world around them and say, yeah, people think the way I do because, this concept is what justifies this type of action and this type of behavior. And so people must think that that this concept is true. And like people are just doing stuff. And I think a lot of this is sort of ad hoc, and it's sort of overfitted to people's behavior, the concepts, and the behavior is actually driven by processes that have very little to do with conformity to these philosophical principles that philosophers come up with. So I think a lot of it is just made up. It's just empty terminology that doesn't account for anything or explain anything and isn't driving how people speak or think or do anything. All right. I will post this question, but I'm not going to get into this topic because today I'm talking about free will. And, I want this channel to be more than just the moral realism channel. I will always be critiquing moral realism on this channel unless I become a moral realist, and then I'll be defending moral realism if that ever happens. So that's always going to be a big part of the content, but I really am trying to push into other content too. I kept promising it, and the day has arrived. So it's on the way, and I'll be talking about that before I wrap up for the night. I think I'll go through another few minutes of the video, and then I'll talk about some stuff from the channel and future plans and that sort of thing. And then I'll call it a night. And then I'll have to do 2 rounds, which is fine. Maybe I should do more of these in the middle of the week. It's often better than just, playing a video game or something. Okay. Right. It is off topic. We don't talk about things off topic here, but apparently we do. Okay. Roberto says, off topic, but what did you say is the best recent defense of broad moral anti-realism? Maybe Olson. Sharon Street seems more in line with your no bullet biting point. So I'm not going to get into this too much, but I actually haven't read Olson's work on anti-realism. Sharon Street actually just discussed evolutionary debunking arguments on another channel. It's a brand new channel. And yeah, whatever. Let's stop and do a shout out for that channel right now. Okay. Let me take this off of here for a minute and let me find the channel. It's a brand new channel, and the person on that channel watched a lot of my content, and well, I don't really know exactly how they found me or whatever, but it has like 5 subscribers. So I want to give them a shout out. Let me go find that channel. And I do have the video scheduled for being posted on my channel as well. So give me a moment, because I discussed evolutionary debunking arguments a little bit there. I think the original plan was for us to talk about them more, but I ended up kind of just talking about a whole bunch of stuff. Where is this video? Ah, okay, yeah, it's not posted yet. Give me a second and I will find a link to it. Oof, I hate when I'm trying to do something in real time and I just can't do it quickly, because then you all have to wait. I think I'm more uncomfortable with the waits than you are. Ah, I got it. Okay, cool. Should have done that to begin with. Alrighty. Let me post a link to the channel in here. Here it is. All right. So that you'll see that the title is a bit of everything. The channel is called The Search for Meaning. And we had about it's a pretty long discussion. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes. I enjoy the discussion. We covered a lot of topics. I do go into meta ethics stuff at the start, which is like, how do you characterize your view? If you've seen that before, I don't know. It'd be cool if I could get some timestamps on it, but I talk about that for maybe, 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. So you may want to skip ahead towards 10 or 20 minutes in before we get into some topics, but I do cover the evolutionary debunking stuff there. So what I'll say about that is that I'm not a big fan of the error theoretic accounts. So Olson, by not a big fan, I mean, I don't endorse them. I can find things to appreciate them and respect them as philosophical positions, but Olson, Strummer, some of the others, I'm just not going to agree with them. And I think that if anything, I think a lot of those accounts give too much credit to the realist positions. So when you say, yeah, are you going to go for no bullet biting stuff? Then yeah, typically. So, but I also don't endorse evolutionary debunking arguments. That's a whole other topic though. So I'm not going to get into it any more than that. So I'll talk about that another time. So join one of my Saturday streams. Those are often more open-ended. Well, I'll get back to this in a second and do a few more minutes. And let's get into some of these remarks. Okay. Okay, some people are being more critical than I'm disposed to be. Cloud of Time says, I would not give IP the charity of not being clear in his explanations. Was this not supposed to be a prepared discussion for him? Was he surprised by the topic? I don't know, so I can't comment on that. Okay, so yeah, I don't mind if you're critical in the chat, but if it's super critical stuff, go ahead and express that, but I don't know if I have much to say about that. All right, people talking about stuff. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to post that either. Sorry, I'm reading like a whole bunch of comments, so I'm still trying to get caught up here. I would say I didn't do a good job today, but actually, it's just you're all posting a lot of comments, which is great. All right, I actually haven't been paying attention to my viewer count. It's pretty good today for what's, this is probably a little higher than average for the channel. It's usually when I have guests or I'm streaming on another channel, like Digital Gnosis or Phil Talk or something, that we get more people. All right, more just general comments about stuff. All right, yeah, other questions about other topics. So Moxie C says, what are the motivations for rejecting qualia? So for me, it's just that I don't think I was ever successfully inducted into what philosophers think and speak in the first place. So somehow I like stuck it out, but didn't buy into the program or something, or maybe it's some dispositional difference, or I could be wrong and confused or whatever. But it's not so much that I reject qualia, but that I don't think that people talking about qualia have ever clearly articulated what they're talking about. So, if I ask people what qualia are, they're like, well, there's something it's like to have an experience. What the hell does that mean? What do you mean there's something it's like? And, typically what I get is, don't you know, and incredulity and a bunch of stuff that's not very helpful. I don't have the concept, and I'm skeptical that they have the concept. I don't think there's a concept to have. I think that talk of qualia or phenomenal states, when they're used to characterize this special sort of ineffable, non-relational features of experiences, nothing about my experience seems ineffable and non-relational and intrinsic and just like purely qualitative and fundamentally inarticulable in third personal terms. And, I hear Dennett talk about heterophenomenology, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like we could do that. And that was like my initial reaction. So it's not like when I encountered Dennett's work in Consciousness Explained that my initial reaction was, there's no way. Actually, this argument's convincing. Maybe this is true. Maybe we don't have qualia after all. It was like, yeah. This, it's not like I had all of Dennett's ideas intuitive in my head all along. But when I read it, I was like, I wish I thought of that. Yeah, that seems like the right way to do this. And so it was more like I was discovering, if anything, that seemed intuitive to me. It seemed intuitive to me that we could account for the world in these purely third personal naturalistic terms. That strikes me as intuitive, if anything does. So I don't like to go around talking about having intuitions, but if anything's intuitive for me, it's that. So, it might sound weird to people for me to say, yeah, I actually find illusionist accounts to be the intuitive positions and to be a reasonable default starting point. I think that people would balk at that and think that that's silly. Well, too bad, because that's how it is for me. So, maybe I'm thinking well about this and other people aren't. I don't know. But what I won't do is get browbeat and intimidated into misreporting my intuitions in order to fit in with other people. It's the same thing so I tend to not be as sensitive to the cold. I don't like hot and other sorts of stuff, but I don't like hot. I don't like heat. I'm getting, it's late and it's a Monday night, so I'm going to be goofy. So I'm kind of resistant to cold more so than other sorts of temperature and weather conditions. And so, if I go out into the cold, sometimes I'm wearing a t-shirt and shorts and I don't notice that it's cold. By the way, I am not immune to cold. I will still be damaged by it. I just won't notice until there's enough of it. So I don't know. It's less aversive to me for whatever reason. And I used to have people say, how come you aren't not wearing a coat? Why are you just wearing shorts? Why don't you wear warmer clothing? And I would say, I'm comfortable. I don't want to wear that. And I had people say that I was like, wearing, trying to like be tough for attention. Now we're talking like I was extremely introverted child that did not want people's attention. I just wanted people to leave me alone. And there were a few times that I would put on a jacket or dress up a little warmer looking just so people would leave me alone. And then I still have people say that I'm trying to like wear, like clothing that would be more suitable for warm weather just for attention or just to show off, as if that's a thing I would want to do. It's not. And I wear the clothing that I wear because I want to and because it's comfortable for me. And it was really kind of frustrating for people to presume that everyone must experience the same like wet weather the same way. Like if they're uncomfortable, I must be uncomfortable. If they're comfortable, I must be comfortable. That's not true. It's what's comfortable for you may or may not be for me. And so philosophers, I think, fall into this rut of thinking, yeah, everybody's got to think about the same way about this stuff. And no, we don't. And some of us are not going to buy into your intuitions or think the way that you do, or find one particular way of thinking to be reasonable or the default position or whatever. And I think that philosophy needs to open its doors to recognizing and appreciating that different people don't just arrive at different philosophical positions by studying philosophy, but many of us start from very different places too. And I don't think there's enough respect or appreciation for that fact. Cloud of Time says, Lance, I politely, you're wrong. Maybe you meant to say more there, but okay, you think I'm wrong about something. Cool. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, so I see the link. Oh man, that was from almost 10 minutes ago. Right, people talking to each other. I'm still looking for more stuff to throw up here. Discourse says qualia sounds a bit mystical in some cases. In other cases, it sounds perfectly coherent. I suspect there is some broader semantic dispute that underlies the usual discourse. Yeah, it could be that there's a semantic dispute. I also think that there might be some conceptual issues here going on. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on or how exactly things ended up the way that they did, but something messed up is going on. Perk is so you asked off topic, what's your favorite David Lynch movie? If that's a question for me, I don't associate people with movies that readily. So what's the David? So David Lynch did like Twin Peaks, which I saw, and that's a cool show. Did they do a newer season? I didn't see it. If so, so like whatever the original Twin Peaks was, I saw that. That was really cool. But I don't even think, I think there's a movie that went with that. I never saw that. And as far as other movies, I don't even know what they are. So I couldn't answer your question. I'm sorry. Are there any particularly famous movies? Also, this is so irrelevant. Why am I answering this? Okay. Anyway. Oh, okay. So Cloud of Time says, I'm just playing on the anti-echo chamber comment, by the way. I haven't really disagreed with anything so far. Well, fine. Say something to disagree with. I'll try to say something for you to disagree with. Okay. So this is an interesting remark from the Mahayanist mind. Agree entirely with whatever Discourse said. I think I read that. I think qualia is a family resemblance of many concepts that we're sort of using as if they're the same concept. Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And so there's probably like when you have these like super duper family resemblance terms, sometimes like there might be a bunch of ways I would use them that I think are totally fine. And then there's going to be ways where I'm not okay with them. And so with qualia, it's one of these words that's just perfect for like Mott and Bailey. So sometimes if you say, yeah, I don't think there's qualia, people go, so you don't think we have subjective experience? No, I think people have subjective experience. So then you think we have qualia? No, hold up. Do you think that you could have qualia in a completely physicalist universe or something? And people will no, because of this and this and this. Okay, well, whatever the thing is, I think we could have it. I'm not a physicalist, but a lot of people are going to endorse like what I take to be really implausible, wonky, or weird metaphysical views that I'm not going to be on board with. And then they're going to appeal to qualia to justify or ground those. And if that's what you think is that constitutive of your notion of qualia? If so, then I'm not on board with it. If not, then sure, I think that there are qualia, but they don't have the properties or characteristics that you think that they have. So you just need to be clear on what you think are the properties of the thing. And are you asking me, do I think there is a thing that has a certain set of properties, and then we just disagree about some additional set of properties that it may or may not have? Or are you saying that it is constituted by or defined by those properties that I'm denying? Because if it is, then I don't think we have it. And then if that's not reducible to, or just, subjective experience, full stop, but it's this other stuff like, no, I think subjective experiences are characterized by certain, they have certain, there are certain properties that we access through, conscious experience, or it's constituted by, or we access these certain types of properties. And these properties are intrinsic, they're private, they're incommunicable, they are non-relational, they are inaccessible from a third person point of view, blah, blah, blah. Like some of those might be a bit redundant, but just the point is that they have certain sorts of properties or characteristics. Well, I don't think that they're like that. So I don't think my experiences are that. And I certainly don't experience them that way, as if those are features of the experience. So yeah, then in that case, then I don't think that we have it. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't be okay with using the term in some more theoretically neutral way. And so that's part of the problem with the way a lot of philosophers talk, is that they'll be less committal or more theoretically neutral uses of a certain term, and then there'll be more committed uses of terms, and then they can just sort of equivocate or slide between the two. to make it seem like, if you're rejecting the term, you're rejecting the more theoretically neutral one, and then you must be an idiot. And that's stupid and wrong. But if you do agree, then you must agree with him about the whole, set of extra metaphysical baggage they want to tack on. And people just move between the two, and they'll just Mott and Bailey, and it's super duper annoying. And it's incredible because philosophers, like professional philosophers, will do this sort of thing. And you would think that they would know better, and for some reason they don't. It's really, really bizarre. Oh, right. There's so many comments. There's a lot. All right. Trying to get caught up. Phlogiston is qualia the new phlogiston. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is, yes. Like Elaine Vital or that sort of thing, where once we have a sufficiently complete descriptive account of like how human brains work and human behavior and all that stuff, that the problem will hopefully just dissolve. We have a comment from Jason Anos Monares that says, oh, and it's only 5 minutes ago. Hi, Lance. How you doing? I'm doing okay. Yeah, this is an unusual stream for me to be doing at this time of the day. All right. Bunch of talk about qualia. All this talk about qualia. I'm going to have to do a video on consciousness. Hey, why don't I ask for this in the comments section? If you think that there would be a good YouTube video that discusses qualia or consciousness, can you post that, like a video that you would like me to review or like play and then react to? Because then you could all come back, we all get this conversation going, and then I cover a topic that you all defaulted to talking about anyway. And that was also the most popular one. If you didn't see, I did a survey, and I didn't mention this. I did a survey of what topics you want to cover. Oh, maybe I did mention it. Whatever. Let me go to it, and then I'll report the results of that. Let's see. Oh, right. Yeah. So if I didn't already emphasize this, do check out that video that I linked from the Search for Meaning channel. And if you like the content, give it a subscribe. I think the channel could, there's only been 2 discussions, one with me, which means at least half of the content is super awesome. Maybe all of it's awesome. So check that out and give a subscribe over there, and check out the conversation. And yeah, maybe we'll have a new philosophy channel on the scene soon that'll be having lots of, it's already there, but like more and more content coming out. Okay, what was I looking up? I already lost track of what I was doing. Oh, right, the survey. Okay, let's get over to that. Moxie C says, sorry about derailing the chat. It's totally okay. It's a live stream. That's what these are for. This is not a prepared video. It's not a recorded thing. I'm trying to interact with the audience. I hope I'm doing a halfway decent job. I know sometimes it takes me a while to get to the answer. Like I'm supposed to be reviewing a video. I got 5 minutes anyway. We got another 15. All that means is there's more content for me to produce, and also, it shouldn't just be a whole video and then I'm like, I agree, I disagree. If the video prompts me to say stuff, then I'll say it. If the chat prompts me to say stuff, I'll say that. It's my stream. Do what I want. Well, I should say it's our stream. Like we get to build what this is together. And if it ends up being me talking about David Lynch and qualia, then fine. So be it. I'm fine with that. Part of what I hope to do is get more relaxed in front of the camera and like just be okay, being more chill. A lot of times I start like, one of the things I'm trying to do is slow down the talking, because I know sometimes I get super excited and I talk really fast. So I've been trying to slow it down. I feel like I've still been talking quickly anyway, but whatever. Okay, where was this at? Okay, community. All right, so here was the question that I posed. What topics would you be most interested in seeing on this channel? This is no guarantee I'll cover these topics, but I'd like to know what people are interested in. I don't have super broad interests, but you're welcome to make. And then it looks like it cut off. Maybe I forgot to type the rest of it. I don't know. Anyway. Oh, and it won't let me fix it. Whatever. People got the gist of it. So let's see. Where is the? Okay, so I had 163 votes, which is pretty good. For those of you who voted, awesome. Thank you. For those of you who didn't vote, I'm not sure if you still can. I can't see on my end because I can't vote because I made it. So check it out. Let me know if you're still able to vote. I'd be curious to see how long these things, like, are they just permanently active? Because if so, and you haven't gone over there, go over to the community section and you could vote now. Maybe, or maybe you can't. Again, let me know. So free will came in at 16%. Intuition and metaphilosophy came in at 24%. Consciousness came in at 37%. It's the most popular. And then empirical psychology, talking about studies and data, came in at 20%. So I chose the least popular to talk about today. So CUC, so, well, at least it was on the list. I didn't choose something totally different, but it looks like people want consciousness. So I'm going to have to do that at some point. Okay. Anything else for me to cover? Yeah, so go check out that channel. Go check out the survey. Moxie C says they're all permanently active, I think. Okay, cool. So then you could go over there and vote. So go to the community section and vote if you're up for it. Moxie C says, I think Kane B had an old video that was kind of harsh on Daniel Dennett's philosophy of mind. I vaguely recollect something like that. Why did I use the word recollect? Why didn't I say remember? It's 9:30 and it's already, I'm too old. Yeah, I kind of feel like I might have seen something like that. Yeah, so I'm big in the Dennett camp on free will. But yeah, I think Dennett is on the right track with the illusionist stuff. So I endorse a position called qualia quietism, which is pushed by Pete Mandic in a paper. The paper is titled something really descriptive, like meta-illusionism and qualia quietism. And I basically think that view is right, which is the view that very roughly terms like qualia and phenomenal state, when they're used in the more, someone could in principle use them in ways that wouldn't be a problem. I don't know if Mandic agrees or not. Maybe we have different views about philosophy of language, but for the most part, their substantive philosophical usages are meaningless, and there's not anything useful that could be said about those terms. And yeah, I think we should just stop using them and just get clear about what we're talking about. So yeah, I'm a quietist about that. I think that there's no traction in that in the hard problem. I think it's just conceptual confusion, and that we should just stop talking about that. I think that there are tractable problems to work on, and we should be working on those. Oh, right. Still going through the comments. I think I'm just about caught up. Yeah. Okay. So I am caught up. Let's play a few more minutes of this video, and I'll see if there's any more comments to make for now. Then I'm going to take. I had a few things I wanted to say, but I feel like I really need a break. Okay. Let's see if I could get through a bit more of the video, though.
And because he studied things, he's read things, so now he's got a different conclusion. But that's not his intuition. Intuitions don't really require thinking. We just sort of act on our intuitions without thinking. They're sort of like our intuitive. This is why I said in the video.
No, in a lot of cases, philosophical intuitions, it's unclear how you would act on them. Like if you have the intuition, I don't know, A theory of time or B theory of time is true, would you act differently? It's a little strange to characterize one's intuitions in terms of actions, because part of what we have intuitions for are non-empirical questions that are very far removed from practical everyday action. And so it's unclear that our actions in any particular case would weigh one way or the other in terms of what our intuitions are. I mean, this is a point I make about moral realism, not to go down that path too much, but I don't think anti-realists do or would, for the most part, act any differently than realists in everyday circumstances. It's not like an anti-realist can't make moral judgments or care about things or object to people's actions or impose their values on others, or abstain from imposing their values on others, or be against murder or be for murder or try to stop people from murdering, or all that's basically acting in any particular way is consistent with being a realist or an anti-realist. So it would be weird to try to read off people's actions what their intuitions are. I just don't think it's the case that people act as if they have free will or act as if realism is true, because I think a person that doesn't believe in free will and doesn't believe in moral realism and doesn't believe in this or that philosophical view, for the most part, in most cases, can actually just act exactly the same way. I don't think everyday action is typically diagnostic of people's philosophical positions.
They're our intuitive starting point. It's how we normally act. For example, I would say B theory of time is true, but intuition tells me A theory of time is true. That's my intuition.
Oh my God, the irony. I just said that there's nothing about theories of time that would be relevant to your actions, and then Michael Jones actually uses that as an example. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I would say I forgot about this, but I had seen the video before and I wrote a blog post about it. So maybe that was in my unconscious somewhere. But yeah, how would you act differently if you thought A or B theory of time was true? Like what would you do that's different? Like, or take like quantum mechanics. Let's say you think that the Copenhagen or the many worlds interpretation is like true. Is there anything in everyday life that you would do differently? I can't think of anything. I mean, maybe we could come up with like some weird experiment or something where like in some really sci-fi scenario where we might have different predictions, but it's not going to matter for practical everyday life as far as I could tell. Okay.
So my conclusion
Your
is
intuitions are
different from my
correct
intuition.
there, Michael.
No, they're not. I would argue they're not. But I would not say I now have a different intuition. No, I still have the same intuition. That's how I act, as if a theory of time is the flow of time, and that's how things are, even though I have a different conclusion.
Yeah, like in other words, we're not insulting. Hopefully, it's not an insult to someone to say they're acting differently than what they've intuited, or to say that they, even though the intuition is there, their conclusions reflect what they think is actually true about reality in spite of their intuitions. This is like why you say they're not infallible in the list of all the things that the philosopher said that intuitions are, right?
Right.
Is that right? Yeah.
And yeah, and even determinists will admit free will is intuitive. So Greg D. Caruso.
Yeah, some of them will, but not all of them will. They don't have to admit that it's intuitive. Yeah, some of them will. Not a very strong point, I don't think.
So says we all subjectively feel that it is ultimately up to us what we choose and who we act, and that we could have chosen or acted otherwise than we did in fact. When we look within ourselves at our ability to act on those choices, we feel ourselves to be directly aware of our freedom. This strong sense of freedom leads.
I don't feel that way. To the audience, look at what was said.
Admit free will is intuitive. So Greg D. Caruso says we all subjectively feel that it is.
We all subjectively feel
ultimately up to us what we choose.
That it is ultimately up to us what we choose
and who we act, and that we could have chosen or acted otherwise than we did in fact. When we look within ourselves at our ability to act on those choices, we feel ourselves to be directly aware of our freedom. This strong sense of freedom leads.
Directly aware of our freedom. What am I supposed to be aware of? I'm directly aware of my freedom. What is it that I'm aware of? So like, okay, when I introspect right now on like whether I want to go fill this glass back up and get another drink, I'm like directly aware of the fact that there doesn't seem to be any like physical impediment to me doing so. Like I'm aware of the fact that like I can get up, that there's no one like yelling at me to not do so, that no one is restraining me. I'm aware that like of various sorts of facts like that. But I don't have like a tingly sense that like determinism isn't inhibiting me and like I can like it, what exactly is the feeling of freedom that I'm supposed to be experiencing? I don't think I'm experiencing anything distinctive or special that I would call free will. I just don't. And I would really like a clearer and richer description of the phenomenology here to know, do people that say that they have these free will intuitions have a different phenomenology than me? Or are they just like bad at phenomenology? Because like nothing about my introspection, about my decision-making abilities lends itself towards any attitudes I would have about like deep philosophical questions. Yeah, I could go get another cup of tea if I want to. There's nothing metaphysically deep about that. I could just point to concrete facts. No one's stopping me. I kind of want to. I also kind of want to keep talking here because I'm aware of like, if you get up in the middle of a live stream, maybe that's not the best decision to make because people are going to drop out of the live stream, that sort of thing. But it's just not clear what additional content there is to this feeling. If there is any additional content, what is it? What is its nature? I'm not sure if I have the phenomenology because I don't even know what's being asserted.
Just to believe that we have free will. So here's a determinist admitting that intuitively we think we have free will. And then he goes on to argue against free will. But that's not a change of his intuition. That's a different conclusion. Richard Boyd says in the sciences.
So again, This is something that I will say, because I don't want to be too critical of Michael Jones here, but this is something that I've noticed that apologists do a lot in discussions. I've seen William Lane Craig and others do this, is that they will find specific philosophers or scientists that concede a point that they think it makes persuasive sense for an opposing view to concede, or that, they'll just find a person that agrees with them and then say, here's a person that agrees with me. Okay. Like, I just don't, what's the point? Like, you happen to find a person that agrees with you. Sure. Yeah. You can find a person that agrees with you. So a smart person agrees with you. Okay. I could find smart people that agree with me. We could have, like, are we going to have a contest to see how many we can count up? Like, I just don't think, like, yeah. Okay. So some philosophers are going to agree with you that it's intuitive that we have free will, but we don't anyway. Okay. But that doesn't mean that if someone comes along and says, okay, but I don't have the intuition that we have free will, that's not true. Like, they could just not have the intuition that we have free will. And I don't see any reason to prioritize the people that do have free will intuitions over people that don't.
Says we decide between theories on the basis of observations, which have an important degree of objectivity. It appears that our moral reasoning, moral intuitions play the same role which observations do in science. So he also says, like,
I'm just not going to agree with that either.
Intuitions are vital in philosophy. That's how we reason from certain things, decide if they're wrong or right. Thomas Nagel, another atheist, relies on intuitions to argue against subjectivists, people that are skeptical of logic. It's like, you have to sort of move me from my intuitions. It's not my job to prove they're true. It's your job, the skeptic, to sort of push me away from there. So when you dive into philosophy, they're always appealing to intuitions, and they're defining what we mean by intuitions. It's not this idea of like a reasonable conclusion, which Paul is talking about. It's fine that he has come to the conclusion that he thinks determined.
Yeah, see that he's talking about, but it wasn't clear that he was talking about a conclusion. It's still not clear to me. I mean, maybe it was, and that could be confirmed, but
true.
It wasn't clear.
Fine, but that's not what an intuition is.
Yeah, well, that's all really good stuff. And it makes me think of, I heard you once responding to someone on a video somewhere and pointing this out, that, look, if you're going to do moral thinking, if you're going to consider morality, you kind of have to look inward. You kind of have to, it's something that because you know what it's like to be a conscious agent and consider morality, right?
Well, I think with the moral argument and a lot of other things, because sometimes people will show instances where intuitions can turn out to be wrong, they want to toss out intuition as a category that can have any validity towards any sort of subject. And I think that's a grave mistake. And I don't think that the philosophers you're talking about go that far and try to say, well, because some of our intuitions about the nature of reality can be wrong, therefore we have to toss out intuition altogether and just move on without it. I think that's a mistake, because I think our intuitions about a lot of things in a lot of areas turn out to be right. Because like you said, intuition is kind of the way that you act. And I would say also certain things to be offensive or pleasant or pleasing or whatever. And that's kind of your orientation. So I think this idea, let's find some places where intuition has turned out to be wrong as a means to dismiss any arguments that begin with intuition. I think that's an error.
So let's keep trucking.
Let's keep going through the clip, because Paul says something here that is kind of ironic.
In competing intuitions, and that doesn't mean anything. I can't say, hey, Michael, you have to disprove my intuition. That doesn't help at all. We have to look to other methods. So I feel like intuition is one of the worst ways of knowing things. Theists seem to think it is the best way of knowing things, and that they seem justified in following their intuition as long as they don't have something really convincingly counter. I suppose that is probably how we all operate. I'm probably operating the same way when it comes to the non-falsifiable free will. I'm following my intuition that we don't have it. Just straight up appealing to intuition isn't going to solve anything.
I don't think this.
Do you want to let me play your response, Michael? Or do you want to respond to this first?
You can go through. It's just funny to me, because
I do want to note that I am reviewing a video where they're playing a video, and then that video appears to be reviewing yet another video. Like, this is some type of review inception. No one has commented on how bizarre this is. So okay, look, someone's got to comment. Like, this is a little weird, right? Like, for reviewing a review of a review of a review. Maybe my next stream should be reviewing this stream. And then the next one should be reviewing that until we just get this recursive thing where I'm reviewing a review and then that's all I do. What do you think? Is that a good idea? Okay, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. All right, let's see. Is there anything interesting going on in the chat? I feel like I'm going to stop at the great. So I'm going to play just the last bit just for them to finish up this part. And then I think we're going to wrap it up for there. And that gets us like halfway through the video. So this is going to be worse than when Danny is around because I'm self-conscious that I have to wrap things up. And I'm going to end up like streaming for a 20-minute video for like 4 hours. That's okay. That's cool.
Is he just saying we're philosophically minded? Because atheist philosophers, like I've quoted, are always using intuitions. They're always building on our intuitions. Like that's what we use in philosophy. It's a key part of it.
And I think he's going to address this more in a minute, but he's basically said, I don't have this intuition that you have.
But
Michael.
He's confusing his conclusion about something he has looked into with intuition as you.
That's so weird. Why are they so convinced that they have intuitions and then people that disagree with him either have the same intuitions or like don't have contrary intuitions? And so if they disagree, it's that those people, like, it seems, here's what it seems like they're assuming. We all have the same intuitions. And so if you disagree with them, then it's because you reached a conclusion that runs contrary to our intuitions. That would make sense of this language of we and our. But it's really strange because, again, a couple things can happen. One is that a person could just not have had those intuitions in the first place. And two, reasoning through things and reading and coming to conclusions can change your intuitions. Intuitions aren't like unchangeable. So why are we assuming that a mistake is being made here rather than that one of those two things has occurred? It doesn't seem like they're going off of enough of what was said to operate under this, like, to be so convinced that some kind of mistake was made. And even if it was a mistake, it's not a, like, okay, so the person reached a conclusion that runs contrary to an intuition rather than it being an intuition. So what? Is it a reasonable conclusion? So like they're making a fuss about this, but like, one, I question whether the fuss is even accurate. And two, even if it was accurate, like, so what? This is not a big deal.
You explained earlier the difference. And so it's not a case of your intuition that we have free will versus his intuition, which is really more of an informed decision that he's made to accept a particular conclusion that's opposite.
Note this phrase, decision. There's also, I do notice this a lot. A lot of people seem to presume a high degree of dixastic voluntarism. I mean, maybe I don't want to read too much into just using the term decision because maybe it wasn't meant literally or strongly as is intended here. But I don't really play that much of a role in deciding what my conclusions or my beliefs are. I am pretty heavily in favor of, I wouldn't say people have no control over what they end up believing, but I don't think they have that much control, and how much control they have in any given context is going to be pretty varied. And like, for instance, I don't think I could like choose to believe in more realism. I could choose to study stuff that could lead me to changing my mind. There's probably some ways in which I can choose or influence, like make decisions about my beliefs. And maybe that's just consistent with the standard views about dixastic voluntarism. But I would be wary of just saying people like are deciding to reach certain sorts of conclusions. A lot of times people feel compelled by what they read or what they experience in ways that it'd be a little strained at best to call it a choice.
The intuition that you would say that you have about, or that people have in general about free will. So I think
that's what he admitted. He admitted that he studied and he read books and he came to the conclusion. That's not his intuition. That's his conclusion.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's
okay, but I mean, sometimes we get in trouble for telling people what they might intuit. So I just want to say,
there we go. Sometimes we might get in trouble for telling people what they might intuit. Yeah, rightly so. Yeah, not really in a good position to just say what people's intuitions are. You know, unless they tell you, it's a little strange to just presume what a person's intuitions are.
Say, is it possible that having formed that conclusion, is it possible that he now intuits determinism because he's more convinced of it?
Excellent question. Yes.
Or
I don't
would you say
think
no?
that is. I don't think that. Let me just use the analogy of A theory and B theory of time again. I think B theory of time is true. That's the conclusion I have. But I still act as if A theory of time is true. Like I cannot act as if like I'm all in these different blocks of time spread out across my entire life and just go. I have to live my life as if A theory of time is true. There's moral subjectivists, there's moral anti-realists out there, but they still live as if morality is objective because.
Oh my Lord. Okay. No, they don't. I don't live as if moral realism is true. I don't live. No, this is not good. Because the presumption here is that there would be some sort of like behavioral differences. If in this case, you make a comparison in meta ethics, you're going to be in trouble with me. So how, like, okay, I'm a subjectivist, right? So I think like murder's wrong and stealing is wrong and all these things are wrong. And what I mean by that is they're inconsistent with my standards and values. And then I act in accordance with my standards and values. So then I go out into the world. What do I do when I encounter murder? I get upset about it. What do I do when I'm voting for policies? I vote for exactly the same policies. How do I react when someone tries to steal from me? I react exactly like a realist might react. I don't want them to steal from me. I think it's bad for them to steal from me. And then let's say you're a realist and you think it's objectively right or wrong to do these sorts of things. And the normative content of your views is identical. You would act exactly the same. You're not going to act differently if you're a subjectivist. Now, someone might say, but if you're a subjectivist, and then someone comes up and they want to steal from you, and because you're a subjectivist and they think it's okay to steal from you, you can't object. Yes, you can. You can object. Like, I think it's wrong for them to steal from me. Why do I care if they think it's okay to steal from me? That's not actionable to me. If I'm an appraiser relativist, I don't care if they think it's okay. So, maybe if your normative moral standards change such that you now hold the normative moral view that if a person thinks it's okay to steal from you, then you must act so as you have to act under the presumption that it's okay for them to steal from you. That's a meta-ethical position that has certain sorts of normative moral entailments. But if you're an appraiser relativist, you're not obligated to act any differently than a realist with respect to your moral standards. Same thing for an error theorist or whatever. Maybe an error theorist couldn't consistently with their view sincerely say there are moral facts. Like they can't say that, but it's not going to change their attitudes or their dispositions or the laws they favor or how they treat attitudinal content of their normative moral dispositions. Those are all intact. Nothing changes. So, and I think the same thing for A theory and B theory of time. I don't think the truth of B theory of time entails any sort of substantive behavioral changes. Like you could just act. What would acting as if it's true entail? As if time is a block and not an arrow or something like that. How would you act differently if that's true? I don't like. There just seems to be an assumption that if these views are true, that they would have certain sorts of behavioral entailments that it's not clear to me that they follow. And I think the same is true for free will and determinism. So I think Michael is making a mistake here in thinking that there are substantive behavioral differences that one would expect or that would be entailed that would follow from acting consistently with one or another of these philosophical views. I just don't think that's true, that they have these sorts of entailments. I should note, by the way, that this is being asserted, and it's not like there are arguments for this. It's not like there's an argument. If you're a subjectivist, you would act differently. Here's why. We're not going to hear an argument for that.
Tuition, even if you reject it. Same with free will. If
Again,
like, I got arrested. And
check out the remark.
Can't. That's just our intuition, even if you reject it.
It's our intuition and subjective. It's not my intuition. So, yeah, I think there is an assumption here that everybody has the same intuitions, and I think that's a mistake. And I think there's an assumption here that while you can override those intuitions, you're always going to act as if the position that's supposed to be intuitive is the true position. And so, sure, you could go around like rejecting free will and rejecting moral realism and rejecting A theory or whatever, but you're going to act as if all those things are true. And I think that's all misguided and wrong. All right, I think I'm going to wrap it up there as far as reviewing the content of the video, and I will pick up finishing the video another time. I mean, we're at 2.5 hours, so. All right, so I'm going to get caught up with the chat, and then I have a couple things that I'll mention. And let's see. Okay, people just expressing their opinions on things. Jason says, I was wondering why someone wouldn't think we have free will. Well, you'd just have to be clear on what you mean by free will, and then I could tell you whether I would think we have it or not. Facunda Sisa says there's a sensible deterministic concept of could have done otherwise. It makes sense even talking about a chess program that decides how much time to dedicate to each move. Yeah, so compatibilists are just not going to have a big problem with could have done otherwise. So someone might try to, like, could have done otherwise is ambiguous. You can either stipulate that you mean it in a way that would only make sense or be possible if there's some libertarian conception that you have in mind, in which case then it wouldn't be consistent with compatibilism, or you don't, in which case it would. So it's just a matter. It's yet another case of just like be clear on what you mean and the problem goes away. So Patrick asks, how good is tea? Are you asking like how good the tea I was drinking is? I don't know, or if that is that just a general question. Tea is good. I like tea. I like every kind of tea. My favorite teas are, let's see, peach tea is definitely the best tea of all. I just love peach tea. Jasmine tea is super awesome. I like cardamom tea. So those are probably my top three. Mint tea is good. Tea is good. Don't diss tea. And of course, there's boba. So that can make tea really exciting. So yeah, there's all kinds of good tea. I like Arnold Palmer's. Those are a good one. It's a tea hybrid. The Mahayana Spine says IP is projecting bigly here. Okay, I thought that one was slightly funny, so I decided to put it up here. So here's an interesting one from Moxie C. I have the feeling that I could have done otherwise, but not any intuition that my choices aren't determined. Same here. Yeah, I feel like I could have done otherwise, but nothing about that feels like, in a way, that's free from determinism. That's not a part of my phenomenology. I don't even know what it would. How could that be a part of phenomenology? How the hell? What would it? How would I know? It's not like I don't think phenomenology like includes whether determinism is true or not. I don't think determinism being true or false feels any particular way. Jonathan Becker says, I couldn't even fill up a bingo card with the token 8. What's an apologetics video without humor and Nagel? Yeah, they do cite the same people a lot. Patrick says Lance is a gastronomic realist, so we should have expected this. Yeah. That's a sort of running joke. So Don Loeb is a philosopher that works in metaethics, is an anti-realist or irrealist, I think is Don Loeb's preferred term. And Don Loeb has this really cool paper on moral incoherentism, which proposes that it may be the case that we have a new type of anti-realism, which is that people have conflicting and mutually incompatible commitments when they make moral claims. So they both mean them in a realist and anti-realist way, cognitivist and non-cognitivist way, whatever. And that as a result, they're sort of just internally contradictory. Like imagine when a person expressed a sentence, the sentence both entailed that there are squares and there are no squares, or the object is to the left and it is not to the left. Well, now the person's just talking nonsense. And so you could end up with these sort of incoherent moral semantics. And this would give, since the claims are incoherent, they're not going to be true. So then you get a type of anti-realism or non-realism where he seems uncomfortable with the term anti-realism, or at least to not prefer it. But, following conventional terminology would be another type of anti-realism that would fall outside the scope of non-cognitivism, error theory relativists. and I should say stance-dependent accounts. Non-cognitivism, relativism, stance-dependent, anti-realist accounts. Oh, hey, Leophilius showed up. How's it going? It's a fourth wall break inside a fourth wall break. That's like 16 walls. Are you referring to me reviewing a video that's reviewing a video that's reviewing a video? If that's what you're referring to, then sure. A lot of times says on the review of the review point. Isn't that a lot of philosophy anymore? Yeah, I mean, maybe. A lot of papers are a response to a response to a response to a response. So why can't a video be a video about a video about a video about a video? Why not? All right. I'm still, man, okay. This is an interesting remark that's totally off topic. So we're done with the video. I'll finish it another time. You know, when Skyrim came out, I really, really loved it. So I'm just gonna get casual now. Absolutely loved it. It was super atmospheric. I got really into exploring. I did do this thing that I want to know if other people did this. I think I found other people online doing this. I became absolutely obsessed with stealing everything, like forks or whatever, like bowls. And I particularly became obsessed with stealing all of the cheese. So when I was playing the game, my main task was I would travel, I would explore, I'd do all the things, but I mostly was just going around looking for cheese. And then I had a mod where it was really cool, where you could get houses. It had like all these places you could like get a house. It had this like underground thing you went into, and it was connected. So you could go in your house in one place, and then you come out and you exit in the other places. It's really convenient. But it had like all these like dummies you could like put your armor on and like dress them up so they look cool, and it had all this like storage space and stuff, places you could put things. But I had one little corner room, and I stacked all the cheese very neatly there. So I just would steal all the cheese, and then I would spend an absolutely outrageous amount of time neatly stacking all the wheels of blue cheese and like the wedges and stuff. I think I have screenshots of my I forget how many, but it was an absolutely ridiculous amount of cheese. Like it was a lot more than you would think anyone would spend time gathering. So I was really into gathering cheese. I had fun doing that. But yeah, I'm curious why you think Skyrim sucks. Because like, yeah, I've played better games. I could say I'm very fond of mentioning this. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on my channel, but I like to talk about my favorite video game of all time. It's called Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together. It originally came out in Japan on the Super Nintendo. When it was brought over to the US, the PlayStation was out, so they brought it over to the PlayStation. And so what was that, late 90s, maybe 1998, I want to say, is when it came out. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to go look it up. But it was late 90s. So it's a tactics game. It was I believe it was an inspiration for Final Fantasy Tactics. And the game has this super rich storyline. It has true RPG elements in the sense that you make decisions in the game that totally impact the entire storyline of the game. So you'll make a decision and it's like, you will play this route in the game or that route in the game. And they are very different, like characters that would be allies or enemies and vice versa. And the decisions are decisions. It's not like, do you want to go to the left or do you want to go to the right? Like you make big, terrible, serious decisions in the game. The storyline is super cool. It had a lot of like minimalist, like poor quality of life features in the game, but the tactical depth of the game was like super good. It also allowed 10-on-10 combat pretty much consistently in every fight. There was very few fights where it was you versus like kind of like a boss fight. But Final Fantasy Tactics, I think it was a little more limited. It used fewer characters. So I actually think it's better than Final Fantasy Tactics. I think Final Fantasy Tactics had a better leveling system and other features of it were better, but Tactics Ogre is awesome. I should say they re-released it, but they made a big changes that I wasn't happy with, called Tactics Ogre Reborn on the PC. It might be on consoles and stuff. So check it out. But I don't want to talk too much about video games. But yeah, Tactics Ogre, Let Us Blend Together. Absolutely love the game. And so yeah, basically turn-based tile tactics games. I don't know what they're called. But the other games I love are CRPGs. So the original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and Fallout 1 and 2. And Baldur's Gate 3 is out now. So very, very different game. But so far, I really like it too. Okay. That was an unusual tangent. People could get me talking about games if they want to. All right, lots of people talking to each other. Yeah, this is Jonathan Becker says, this is hilarious because I've noticed that people learn about phenomenal conservatism and then all of a sudden they have these super convenient intuitions. I've noticed this too. It's very convenient that suddenly, so basically I think a lot of people misuse phenomenal conservatism to try to just shift the burden onto other people to prove that they're wrong about things. I mean, like imagine I went around saying, like, here's a phenomenal conservative move you could say, you could use. It seems to me that God exists. And so the burden of proof is on atheists to prove that God doesn't exist. Like, are atheists going to take that too seriously? They're going to be like, well, okay, but it doesn't seem to me that God exists. Why should I care? Well, I'm justified in believing God exists. So, my biggest problem with this is this like private justification thing. It's like, yeah, that kind of justification is super cheap. It's very easy for things to seem a certain way to you. Why should anyone else care? I thought philosophy was in the business of us figuring out what's true, not just going around saying, well, I'm justified in believing A. And then the other person goes, okay, well, I'm justified in believing not A. And you don't have any defeaters and I don't have any defeaters. So I guess we'll go home. Like what the hell kind of discussion is that? Justification. Sapir says, do you think people can be or often are wrong about their own intuitions? I think so. Yeah. I think people can be confused about their own intuitions. I don't know what else to say about that right now. Maybe I'll develop on it another time, but yeah, I do think so. Yeah, so I avoided the name because I don't know how to pronounce it. I want to know how Lance pronounces that. I don't know how to pronounce it. So I was avoiding it. Notice I was like the person they're responding to. So I'm not going to try. I'll go check out a video and then figure it out because I do think it would be better to use. I tend to avoid using people's names, which is a little ironic in a video where I said Michael Jones a million times. I mispronounce names. I feel awkward about it. I feel bad about it. And I try to do my best, but I don't know. I'm awkward about it. So if someone knows or they know a video where I could find out, that would be great. Because then I would like to say whatever that name is. That look, when I look at it, I can think of at least two ways to pronounce it, and I absolutely guarantee whichever one is the correct one, I would choose the other one. That always happens. Like okay, whatever. I'm not going to get into examples. Okay. So Leo Felix gives me some hint. I'll never forget how William Lane Craig first pronounced it. Pelagia. Well, it's not that. I don't think. Maybe it is. The context implies that it's not. I'm still going through comments to see if there's some good ones. Yeah, so Moxie C says, does IP not think it is possible for intuitions to change? They might talk about that a bit more, all three of them, when we continue the video next time. I don't know. I assume Michael would say, yeah, people's intuitions can change. And maybe they would just say, look, maybe intuitions can change. But I think that they're focused on this particular case. I think that they think that the person that they're responding to was like, hey, you're all saying you have these free will intuitions, but I've read about this topic and I came to the conclusion that we don't have free will. So, haha, I have the intuition that we don't have free will. And they're like, no, you don't have the intuition that we don't have free will. You just think we don't have free will. It's not the same thing as having an intuition. And they may be right about that. I don't know. But even if they were, like, so what? It just doesn't seem like a very big deal. But yeah, I would suspect, I don't know whether he would say, yeah, people's intuitions could change. But it'd be pretty weird if someone said people's intuitions can't change. Seems to me pretty clear that they can, but it's my intuition that they can. But it's not just an intuition. Oh, right. Yeah, so Sapir says, Jason, generally here, IP is claiming that free will is intuitive to everyone or almost everyone. Lance is saying it isn't obvious that this sort of intuition is the case. Yeah, I would actually go further than this and say that I think it's not the case that free will is obvious to everyone or intuitive to everyone. I think I'm going to say the same thing about bad ethics. I don't think most people have intuitions about free will. At least not if you're clear about what you mean philosophically speaking. So that's what I wanted to mention, is that what I've been planning to do is a video that's a review of the empirical literature. So I'll say a little bit about that now. So there's three main types of empirical research on, you could say, the experimental philosophy or like folk free will research. And this is research that's intended to explore a few questions. And those questions, there's three categories. One is whether ordinary people are compatibilists or incompatibilists. So this is looking at the question of whether people have the intuition or think that free will is compatible with determinism. That's one line of research. And that's the most like X-fi-ish, most philosophy-oriented research. The other ones get a little more into like personality and social psych. The other two lines of research look at correlational data and experimental data, or causal data. So the correlational stuff looks at what variables correlate with people's belief in free will. So as you have it, as like the higher a person's score and belief in free will, what things positively and negatively correlate with like an increase in belief in free will. So that might be the biggest literature out of the three. I don't know exactly how many papers of each. And there's a variety of free will skills. And then the third one is the experimental stuff. And what that attempts to do is say, okay, well, if we increase or decrease a person's degree of belief in free will, how does that change their behavior? And so I have methodological concerns with all three of these literatures. With respect, I could just say very briefly, with respect to the determinism, compatibilism stuff, I think most people probably are not interpreting the questions in the way the researchers intend. And I don't think people have any pre-philosophical, like prior to training, views about determinism for the most part. And so I think that these studies are probably, what we're seeing is spontaneous theorizing, and they're not actually tapping into how people thought prior to engaging with the questions or studying philosophy. So I don't know if there's much traction that you could get out of those studies. So that's going to be a problem. With respect to the correlational stuff, I think the scales are quite bad. I think that they don't tend to rely on valid measures. In fact, my very first video on this channel, I discussed those scales. So you could go back and check out that very first video. It's not in the live section. It was a live, but it's in, or maybe it's in my live section. I'm not sure. Well, go check it out yourselves. Look around, check out my channel. Look at my videos. Look at them and then watch them all. So that one, I discuss some of the skills, and I talk about the poor face validity of the items. So they include items like strength of mind can always overcome the body's desires, or people are always responsible for what they do, that sort of thing. The second one is a bit of a paraphrase. I think the first one is verbatim. And those are just not particularly valid measures of free will. They're just not. And I can discuss why, and I will. So that's the one I've worked on the most, is those free will scales, because I have big problems with I think that they have very poor face validity. They actually do have other problems. Some of the scales that have been developed have actually pretty bad factor structure and some other technical issues, but I don't know if I want to talk about that on the channel. Maybe I can. I don't know. Some of this stuff is really fun for me, but I'm convinced it's going to be like mind-numbingly boring for other people. So I don't know. Also, a lot of that stuff requires more preparation, because actually I have to go look at the scale. If they have like some of the, like if they have raw data or some other sorts of stuff, like getting some of the actual data it just requires more work. It's not something I could just talk about off the cuff. So some of that stuff requires more prep. And then the third set are the causal ones, where they attempt to reduce or increase belief in free will. Most of them focus on decreasing belief in free will, probably because they're assuming people start with an initially high level of degree of belief in free will, and then they're going to lower it. But those studies, I mean, the biggest problem is the main studies have just not replicated. So people have attempted to replicate them and they didn't replicate them. But also I have problems with the manipulations. I think they're super duper confounded. So in all three cases, I think that there are serious methodological problems. I think the biggest ones are probably with the correlational and experimental studies. I think the compatibilist, incompatibilist stuff is overall more engaging and well-designed research, but they're all going to have, there's something to say about all of them. And so what I really want to do is do a video on that, but I feel like that's too much for one video. So it might have to be 3 different videos. The compatibilist, incompatibilist stuff, so what I'd probably do is start talking about some scales, then talk about the experimental stuff. And then if it's like popular stuff, maybe I'll do compatibilist, incompatibilist stuff. But there I would really have to go dig up the stuff that I read back. What is it now? 6 years ago? Wow. It was a long time ago. I think 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm rusty on that stuff. It's been a while. So those are the three literatures where sort of the empirical research interfaces with the free will stuff. They're all interesting. There's all cool stuff to say about those. And they do fall outside the scope of all this metaethics stuff that I'm always talking about. So I do know people have been like, too much metaethics, too much moral realism. So, hey, we got the free will stuff. Now, at some point, this is an area I have not done work in, and I haven't read many of the papers. I've read a few. There is experimental philosophy on consciousness. So it's stuff like consciousness, hard problem of consciousness, various sorts of questions about qualia. So there's a whole literature on that. I haven't read much of it, and it looks super duper interesting. And my guess is I'm going to find methodological concerns with that. And so that might be a whole endeavor. But I'm not going to sit down and read and familiarize myself with an entire literature, given the amount of work that I have to do. I have to publish papers and write articles and do stuff. So probably not going to start and crack it open a whole new literature. So it's something that's on the list, but that might be a couple of years from now, because I'm going to have too much work to really sit down and immerse myself in a whole literature. But so for covering the consciousness stuff, what I'm more likely to do is invite guests onto the channel to discuss their work. So that's just going to be like, it's just, I haven't studied consciousness stuff enough for me to give you enough to chew on as far as my own point of view on those questions. Okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I have other announcements, but it's getting late. I'm getting tired. We're going on 3 hours, and I'm going to have to call it quits. So I have more announcements, but you may notice if you follow my blog, I haven't been posting there as much, and you may notice I haven't been streaming quite as frequently. And I guess whatever, I'll just say, I've been really sitting on the drawing board, sort of thinking about how to expand and improve the channel. And a big part of that is bringing on more guests. So I've got at least 5 or 6 people lined up to come on the channel. So that's a lot. A lot of them are going to be scheduled for December after, like while I'm on break and on vacation. It'll be easier for me to do interviews and debates and discussions and that sort of thing. So what I can say about that is out of the 6 or 7, there's only one of them that's on metaethics. I've got a bunch of other topics that are going to be coming up. So we've got some free will. I still don't have anybody for consciousness. So if you have recommendations, please let me know. So yeah, the main thing is that I'm going to really be investing the time and effort into expanding the range of topics and content on the channel so that we move out of it just being moral realism all the time. So I guess that's the big one. I'm also working on much longer posts for the blog, and I'm sort of like restructuring how I want to approach that. So there's going to be probably some aesthetic changes, overall planning changes in the kind of content. And yeah, there's going to be some changes. So that's a lot of stuff. Probably a lot of it I'm going to start rolling out in December and January. So we're going to have maybe another 6 weeks, I'd say, of things being kind of quiet. Actually, I would say it's going to be 6 weeks. There'll be a little bit of activity early December. Then things will probably get quiet again around the holidays because that's family time for me. And then back in January. So we're really talking about next year is when things are really going to start going in a new direction. I talked about going, I'm going to have all these guests. And I ended up having a few, but not as many as I wanted. And changing up the content a bit. And I didn't do as much as I wanted. That is going to change now, because before it was like, I kind of want to do it. Now I'm looking at where my channel has gotten the last year. I'm looking at other people's channels. I'm looking at the growth and looking at where people have gotten to where they are. And I want there to be more. I want this to be more than just the moral realism is wrong channel. And so this is really more of an internal change, and I want to do it right. So I'm putting the thought into how to do it right, and then I'm going to do it. So that's happening. Oh, right. Let me see if there's anything else people have said in the comments. There's so many comments. Cool. This is awesome. I love this. I don't want to get to the point where it's, well, you know what? I do want to get to that point where there's so many people commenting I can't possibly interact. But at that point, what I'd have to do is start finding a way to interact with people, because I really want things to remain interactive and to really read what people say and respond. I do read a lot of the comments, even if I don't post them on here. I did see, as I'm scrolling through, just cheese tea in all caps. I have no idea what the context for that is. In fact, I'm going to stop. What are you talking about? What the hell are you talking about? Oh, so Sapir says, wait, Lance, you have to show how far into the video you made it. So I made it 11 minutes and 50 seconds, so a little bit over half the video. Oh my God, that was 20 minutes ago when you said that. What have people been saying the past few minutes? Patrick says something about objectively good cheese. I don't understand the cheese comments. What is the context for this? What did I miss? Must have skipped over too many comments. All right, we have Goblin Lord X. Sorry, a bit late to the party. I feel it is hard to say the problem goes away. I do feel like people behave and interact with others generally as if others could have done otherwise. Yeah, you just have to be clear about what you mean by could have done otherwise. Like, I think people could have done otherwise. I think it's perfectly compatible with not believing in free will. So I just don't see what the issue is. All right, Jason Abnos Monaro says, Lance, I'd love to hop on Discord with you and chat this future. I'll join your Discord. Please do. So this is something I should mention. I don't mention this often enough. I do have a Discord. You could join that. I have a blog. You could join that. It's on Substack. I moved everything over to there. And what else? I think that's it. But you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, do all that stuff if you haven't done it already. I'm really, my target goal, I should say, for this year, I was at 124 people the last time I checked on my channel. And I really want to hit 1,000 people by the end of the year. That's my target goal. So we got to make that happen. Okay, now I'm at 828. So now I've got 4 more people. So if you can help me make that happen, I would be immensely appreciative. I really want to hit that 1,000 target. But next year, the goal is to at least double that. So, as you get more viewers, more people talk about your channel, more people share your channel, and then you could grow a little quicker. I want to get to the point where we're really growing here. I think if I expand the range of the content and I do a broader range of topics, and not just in philosophy, but in psychology as well, I just have to get over that concern. Like once I start a topic, like I'm talking about free will now, I think I'll be more comfortable talking about free will again in the future. So I got to try to break all those topic dams by just getting started on them. And I think a good way to do that is with interviews. So if I interview someone about consciousness, that'll get me talking about it and that'll get me more comfortable talking about it. I've been staying in my comfort zone for way too long, which is the stuff I did my dissertation on. And I got to get out of that comfort zone. I can't be in there forever. Okay, anyway, so yeah, you could join my Discord. Really, we try to keep it pretty cool over there. I don't like people getting in there trolling and yelling and screaming and acting wild. So if people get in there and they are too insulting or critical or nasty, we take care of that. They will not be around if they continue to act that way. So I try to keep it less of a kind of just nasty, unpleasant place to be. And it's intended to be a more pleasant place for positive interactions. And if you have a bad interaction there, let me know, let one of the mods know, we'll take care of it. We're trying to make it to be to a more serious place for discussion. And yeah, we do talk about other topics there besides just meta ethics. Okay, so there would need to be a bit more context. So Goblin Lord X says, I'm not actually sure what you mean by the problem goes away. Yeah, this is the kind of thing where I'd have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. So maybe it's something to address more in the future. I'm kind of wrapping up here. But I do think the problems tend to go away depending on exactly what you're talking about. All right. Still 20 minutes behind. All right. So the Mahayana's Mind says Earl Grey. Earl Grey is awesome. I really like double bergamot tea. So if you pack in that extra bergamot, I really like that. Oolong is great. I'm a big fan of oolong. I buy oolong. I get oolong when I'm out places. Peach, bubble tea, they're all good. Yeah. So you have good taste. Yeah. The tea I was drinking was jasmine tea. It was jasmine green tea. It was iced jasmine green tea in particular. I like chai as well. Mate? Are you talking about? Yeah, you are, aren't you? Are you talking about? So what I'm used to calling it is, let me see if I could pronounce it correctly or approximate. Chimarrão. Like it's the, I guess maybe that's the Portuguese name for it. So if I knew where it was, I would go grab it. So we do have that. So yeah, we have that around the house. That's good stuff. And we drink it very hot with whatever. That's a whole other topic. I don't technically think it's tea. I think it's an entirely different plant. But yeah, anyway, so that's a whole other thing to talk about sometime. Goblin Lord X has more questions. If these are like big questions about them another time, you're also welcome to leave a comment on the video. And now I'm hiding behind the image. Okay. Put my head up above it. Okay. Goblin Lord X says, can you specify what you mean when the problem goes away? It seems like most people interact with others. Yeah, it's too big of a question for me and like too far in the past for me to address that now. So bring it up. You know what? The next time I stream on this, where I continue with the channel, bring it up and I'll talk about it. And it would be helpful for me to get more concrete about it. Very roughly, what I mean is something like when a person specifies what they mean, typically it will be disambiguated down one of two or more paths where the answer is often either obviously true, obviously false, in a way that could be actionable within respect to the like. So okay, so imagine people are going around saying, in the teletransporter case. So a person steps into a teleporter, breaks down all the particles in their body, and then it reassembles them in a new location, or it like uses new particles to like create an exact copy of the person. And then people will say, is it the same person? I think it's a goofy question. Are they composed of the same stuff? No. Are they psychologically identical to the previous person? Yes. Are they causally continuous with the person in some well-specified way? Well-specified way, and the answer will either be yes or no. Like, is the body that they're physically composed of, the copy, causally continuous with the previous body in the sense that, like, you have this mass and then you swap out a part, but like there's still a continuity, kind of like the ship of Theseus. No, it's constituted of entirely new stuff all at once. So that didn't occur. Is it causally continuous in the sense that like certain causal factors led the person to walking into this teletransporter, pushing a button, just like being broken down and then reappearing in that other place? And that whole thing is kind of like this specific causal set of events. Yes. So like you could just keep being specific about which questions you're asking. And if by person you mean that particular thing took place, then the answer will either be yes or no, or yes or no. It's not a big puzzle. So a lot of these puzzles become non-puzzles when you disambiguate. So that's one sense in which I mean the problem goes away. The philosophical problem goes away. As for whether or not a practical problem goes away, that's going to depend on the nature of the disambiguation. So let's say that we answer the teletransporter case in a particular way, and it turns out that if you say, okay, well, I think it would be morally really awful, or personally I would be opposed if I'm not causally continuous after teletransportation, and I agree, given the way you've stipulated the conditions and the situation and blah, 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 that I'm not. Okay, so then I'm against it. So you still might face a practical problem of, what if someone really wants you to go through a teletransporter and you think that would lead to your death in a way that like you care about? You don't want to die in that way. Okay, well, now you got a practical problem. That's a separate issue how you're going to resolve that. So the sense in which the problem goes away is in the sense of, with sufficient disambiguation, philosophical problems often dissolve, and then we're left with like the leftovers, which are often quite challenging practical questions that may or may not go away. All right. Oh, did you ever answer the question about why you don't like Skyrim? I'm still curious, and if it's somewhere, I guess I could check later. But if it's easy to just say it real quick, let me know, because I'm getting caught up, and then I'll be able to see. Mahayana Spine says, I like RPGs and TES, but Skyrim failed in so many key areas. I stuck all my money in a drawer in my house, and Skyrim had a whole lot of money. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff. I really liked hoarding everything in that game. I would just collect everything. I don't understand all the stuff about body armor, and I still don't understand all the comments about cheese. So there's something about body armor and cheese in this. Wait, I was talking about cheese. So of course people were going to bring up cheese. What am I talking about? I have, what does Danny say? Goldfish memory? I have goldfish memory. So, and it's 10:30 now because I've been at this. I'm hitting the 3-hour mark. Boom, right now. So I've been at this for 3 hours now. I knew it was going to be an epic one. Okay, great. So here we got some answers because this was back, 30 minutes ago. Holy crap. How far behind am I? Okay, everyone is super talkative. Okay. Is basic and pathetic. Exploration is meaningless because there's no mystery or valuable elements to it. Combat is like a hack and slash, but a bad hack and slash. Yeah, I didn't find the story compelling. I actually found it super boring. Exploration is meaningless. Well, I really enjoyed the exploration. I added a bunch of challenging, like difficulty and challenging and survival mods. And so it made it a bit more fun. But once I got those down, it was no longer challenging. I found it impossible for the game to be challenging. Like it was just too easy. And that was why I ended up giving up on the game. I never beat the game. It was just so easy. I couldn't enjoy it. And it wasn't like that with the original, like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. When I played those, they were challenging at the time. When I got really good at them and I could just stomp everything, I ended up putting like the tactics mods in there and stuff. At like for Baldur's Gate Trilogy or whatever, I put all the mods. Like it was an absurd amount of mods and try to make it as hard as possible. Yeah, one of the ones I really loved, and I could never find a new version of it for Baldur's Gate, was a mod that because you could always, like before a fight, you could scout things out and then like buff your party up, do blasts and draw upon Holy Might and cast all your buff spells in advance and then start the fight. But if you started a fight with clerics or wizards and they wanted to cast mirror image or blur or whatever, they would be like, if they're doing that in the middle of the fight, okay, well, meanwhile you're killing their melee or whatever, and then you're going to take care of them and they're sitting there trying to buff. So what this mod did is when you started the fight, it gives them all the buffs they would have got if they had the time to do it before you started. So the wizards came pre-buffed, the clerics came pre-buffed, and they even did like AoE buffs. It was amazing because it made those fights way more interesting and challenging and fun and cool in a way that wasn't just they have more hit points and armor class or like more attacks per round or whatever. The other thing it did is that thieves would be given a few potions of invisibility. So in the middle of fighting them, they would disappear and then reappear and backstab and disappear. It was just awesome. I loved it. So I never found that mod again. I don't know what it was, but it was super cool. And it made the whole game way more difficult in a way that was super fun and challenging and awesome. And to this day, I have super fun memories of it just being just wildly fun. So yeah, the original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are just so good. The dialogue is incredible. I love the story. I think the story is awesome. Baldur's Gate 2 does not disappoint. I think a lot of people might find, I think if you surveyed everybody, Baldur's Gate 2 might win by like 60-70% of people. I don't know. I think a lot of people like it better. The story in both is solid. They're a little bit different. Baldur's Gate 1 is a little more exploration, open world kind of thing. It's a little more sandboxy and you run around. But Baldur's Gate 2 is a bit sandboxy. I do think it has a bit more of a more forced storyline. But Baldur's Gate 1 has such cool elements. So look, Baldur's Gate 2 is super amazing in so many ways. The aesthetics of the game is awesome. There's so many cool things. And that's in spite of shortcomings. It has some pretty significant like quality of life and UI issues. There's balance issues. Certain classes are just better than others. So like multi-classing and dual classing is overpowered in the game. So there's like really kind of lame exploits you could do. So it has its downsides, but just everything else is so overwhelmingly awesome. It makes up for it. I love the Icewind Dale games too. Icewind Dale 2 is not super great, but they're all good. I like all of them. What is the title of the game? That was a while ago, so I don't know which. Tactics Ogre? Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together? Is that what you're asking about? Yeah, that's that was the game that I had mentioned, although that was a half hour ago now. So oh yeah, so yeah, Tactics Ogre, yeah, I have that. Cool. All right. Mahayana says Baldur's Gate 3 will be interesting. I can't wait to play it. So I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 actually probably more than Tactics Ogre, even though I like Tactics Ogre better because it's a PlayStation game and I like PC stuff better. So I think of all the games I played, it's Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, the most playthroughs of any game I've ever played. Just over and over and over and over. I could just endlessly replay them. They're so damn good. They release these like enhanced edition. I've played them like as frequently as like as recently as like a couple years ago. Like I just keep replaying them. It's absurd. I've been like replaying them for 20 years. They're just wildly fun and awesome for me in every possible way. So they're just, yeah, they're that good. Anyway, Baldur's Gate 3 is very different. So it's made by Larian Studios, and it's turn-based. The original Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, you like pause and issue commands, and then it's real time, but you could pause. So combat style is different. Baldur's Gate 3 has turn-based, but it's actually like it's fast-paced. So my favorite game of all time is this slow as hell turn-based game, and I love those games. If it takes me 3 hours to get through one battle, I love it. So I love the super duper ponderously slow games that drive people nuts. Yeah, it's fast, and it's what I would say is it's turn-based in a way that I think people that don't like turn-based combat would still be okay with it. And I think that's generally the impression people have. The voice acting is fantastic. The characters, I played it in early access, and they must have made changes, or I don't have a good memory. I found the characters a little more insufferable and annoying, but like in the updated version, I like all of them. Like just all the characters are cool. So there's characters, Shadowheart, Astarion, all these people. They're engaging, they're interesting, they're different. The characters are like rich. They're very much in the story. It's not like you meet a person, they say a thing, they join your party, and then there's a person following you around. They're part of the story, and they're deeply interwoven into it in a way that, like, everyone you come across has something to say. They have something to do. The world is so rich and dynamic and engaging. It's just I don't even have words for it. It's totally just mind blowing. It's like if someone said, hey, like if it was 1998 and someone said, imagine a future like Dungeons and Dragons based game that would be like everything you ever wanted. This game kind of looks like that game. Like it's not like new games where I'm like, this is fun, or this is enjoyable, or this has good elements. It's like all the things I ever wanted at once. It's actually kind of overwhelming. In fact, the game is so overwhelming in what you can do that I haven't played it in a couple weeks because I can't handle it. It's too much. It's like eating the richest food you could ever eat as a game. So yeah, it's super cool. And also this has nothing to do with free will, and I don't care. I keep trying to justify, like, it's my channel, I can talk. I need to stop saying that. Yeah, I can talk about it. Okay, cool. Okay, so Goblin Lord has asked a few more questions. I hope I addressed that because I'm still getting caught up on stuff from a long time ago. Love a lot of Lance's takes, so I'm still a bit lost and some of the problem goes away. I hope I answered some of it. If I didn't, I'm happy to talk about it some more later. Mahayana says, wonder if Philip Goff will come onto your stream. So I don't know about onto a live stream, but I did have a discussion with Goff before, and hopefully we'll talk again. But Goff right now is out, just published a new book and is out talking about that book and doing stuff on that. The book is, I'm not in a position to read that book and discuss it. If I did, then I would invite Goff on the channel. But like when you're out promoting and working on specific stuff, I totally get that you're going to focus on that content and not go discussing other stuff. We did have a discussion, I think, about moral realism, or did we talk about psychophysical harmony? It's one of those. I don't know. I can't ever remember the conversation. See, goldfish memory. So yeah, at some point that'll probably happen. So yeah, Goff is super friendly, very motivated to engage with people with contrary views. So we'll probably have a conversation at some point. At least as far as I'm concerned, if Goff wants to talk, we'll talk like right away. So I really enjoyed that conversation because it's someone that I strongly disagree with, that it doesn't feel like tense or upsetting to have a conversation like they think I'm stupid or evil or something for disagreeing with them. Because sometimes people do act that way. If you hold views like mine, if you talk to some people, they kind of talk like they're trying to, like, it's not always a lot of fun. I'm not going to get into that now, but Goff is like comfortable to talk to. It's someone that genuinely, Goff is someone that genuinely appreciates people with contrary points of view. And maybe some of that comes from promoting panpsychism and having just constantly people mocking and ridiculing and calling it a stupid view. and maybe there's some, similarity in that respect, like being on the receiving end of unnecessarily, like, it's one thing to say the view is wrong and very wrong and whatever. It's another thing to be rude to the proponent of the view, and that's not cool, and people shouldn't do that. All right, so this is recommendations about who to have on. Castrop, I just don't know well enough to have a conversation. Like, I'd have to go do some readings. Chalmers is a big ask. I don't think that would be easy. Jay Garfield's work on Buddhist philosophy and consciousness. I don't know who that is, but that could be cool. Feel free to send me a link. You could email me. You could post it in the comments. I'd certainly be happy to talk to somebody about. So Buddhist philosophy, that might be really interesting. Like, that would be a case though where it's like way outside stuff I'm familiar with, so it'd be a little challenging for me to be like an informed participant in the discussion. If there's some readings I could do in advance, I'd be down for that. Okay, now I'm at over 3-hour mark. Is this going to be my longest stream of all time? We're going for a record here. You would need, for Discord or for here? Because I'm eventually going to need some mods for here for when the channel gets really busy. Faith because of reason. Any word on a debate between you and IP? No, that I haven't really made an attempt. So yeah, no recent attempt has been made. And I'm not intending to reach out right now. I'll give it some time. Cool. Well, I'll post people that say really nice stuff. If someone has something really critical to say, post that so I could be fair and post some nasty stuff about me. Not sarcastic, like genuine criticism. Okay, Sapir says, love your channel, Lance. Well, it's a heart your channel, Lance. I really appreciate the density resolution of your commentary, and I've learned a lot from you. Thank you. Awesome. Cool. Okay. Cool. All right. People talking about finding my Discord. Someone mentioning tea. Yeah, it's not tea. I'm for some reason weirdly playing dumb, like I don't already know that it's not tea. So it's some other type of plant. I think it's from South America. And I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the history of this particular thing right now. But I do have something to say about it at some point. Okay, I'll when I have the I can't even remember the name of the thing that you hold it in. But it's a gourd, and then you have this metal straw, and then you drink it out of that, and it's like really hot. So I'll show you one at some point, and then I'll talk more about what the deal is with those, like why I have that at some point, but not now. And there's something that happened to me with those one time that I'll mention as well. So that's something for another day. That's like a whole thing. All right, more people talking about tea. We should just do a whole thing talking about tea. Maybe I should bring someone on that knows about tea. I would do a whole video just on a tea expert talking about tea. That I would like it. If you don't like it, too bad. I don't know. What do people think? What if I brought someone on to talk about tea? Is that too weird? That's not philosophy. I don't know. I would want to talk about tea. I like tea. Why not? Okay. Right, and that's so the Mahayanists. We're all over the place with topics now. Whatever. The Mahayanists mine says, yes, I mentioned why story exploration and combat are bad. Yeah, so I did mention combat. Combat in Skyrim is not good. I put as many mods as I could in to improve it, but there was only so much you could do. I'm trying to think what games I think have like super good combat. I'm gonna say something potentially. Nah, I'm not. I don't want to criticize a beloved game too much, but there's a very popular game where I don't really like the combat in it. All right, someone is mentioning the Castrop stuff I could find. Yeah, I know I can. I haven't done it yet. I know a guy that's interested in philosophy and tea. I can reach out despite not. Well, okay, but I was just thinking of talking about tea, not like the philosophy of tea. Is there a philosophy of tea? What the heck is that? Is that a thing? I don't know what that is. All right, Jay Garfield also wrote a translation and commentary on. Whoa. I'm not even going to try that one. Nagarjuna's. What? And the commentary includes references and analogies to Western philosophy. Yeah, so I'm interested in non-Western philosophy mostly because of my general disposition and concerns about Western philosophy being like too Western centric. So my general take is that culture and different perspectives from around the world matter. They shape our psychologies a lot. They influence how we think about philosophical issues. And Western philosophers, I think, mistakenly presuppose that everybody everywhere pretty much thinks the way that Western people do. And I think the psychological evidence shows that definitively that's not true. People around the world think differently than Western philosophers do. And they're just wrong to think everybody thinks the way they do. And I think it's a big deal, but unfortunately it's not something I've spent a lot of direct time looking into. So if there's non-Western philosophical traditions that I could get people on here to talk about, that'd be absolutely awesome. I have this anxiety about like talking to someone about something where I'm super ignorant of the topic. I'm just going to have to be like, what is that? Who is that? I've never heard of that. Like, you'd be getting a lot of that from me. And as a viewer, maybe that would be okay. I like, again, it's a question of like, how much out of my comfort zone should I be willing to go? And can I be a good conversation partner or interviewer if I'm not knowledgeable or not that knowledgeable? Because like, if I read an article a few days before and take some notes, is that enough? Watch a couple videos. I don't know. It might be enough. It might not be. I don't know. Oh, okay. So Saphir says, not necessarily philosophy of tea, just that they're interested in philosophy and tea. Okay, well, then, so am I. But I don't know enough about tea. Like, what am I going to do a video and be like, I got this somewhere. I don't know. What does it say it is? Oh, okay. I guess it's oolong tea. It's good. I don't know. It's not like, I'm not like a tea equivalent to a sommelier. Like, I'm not going to be able to say, there's notes of whatever. I'm just like, it's good. So that's all I do with tea. All right. Mahana says, Jay Garfield and Brian Van Norton did a piece on that, how Western philosophy is too westernized. That I want to see. So if you could post that in the comments or something, please do, or email it to me, whatever. I don't care. I'd love to check that out. All right. Now the involuntary yawns are coming. I was supposed to close this out, an hour ago? There's so much going on. Oh, okay. So, and you said they got huge pushback for saying Western philosophy is too. What is the pushback? That's like obviously true. What would even be the objection? Van Norden is an expert in Chinese philosophy. That would be awesome to have on here. Again, though, I don't know enough. Do you know much about Derrida? No. Cool. Okay. Introduction to Classical Chinese Philosophy, Indianapolis. All right. I mean, I could go back through and check the chat. Posting these in comments might be a little easier for me. Jason says tea is better than coffee. Yeah. So I like tea probably better than coffee, but I like coffee. I also like beer. I like them all. Cool. Thanks. So we're getting a lot of useful book recommendations here. So thank you for those. Okay, an article in the New York Times. Awesome. All right. So that could probably, get my feet wet and get me a little introduced to the topic and then see if I could. It would be very hard for me to get another book out there. I'm still have a few books to get through before I could do anything else as far as book reading books goes. I'm losing my ability to talk, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up there. All right, we're gonna call it quits there at 3 hours and 20 minutes. All right. Good night, everybody. That's another thing I should do is I just noticed my dog is right here looking at me. So she hasn't had enough time to play or get much attention in the past few hours, but she's down there looking at me reproachfully. Like, how come you're not paying attention to me? No, she's not reproachful. But I'll have to show her on the channel she's appears in one thumbnail for one of my videos. So if you want to see her name is Pitanga. And yeah, I'll have to bring her onto the channel sometime. She's very cute. She's very tiny, so I could just pick her up and show her. All right. So that's it for now. Oh, you know what? Why can't I just bring her up right now? Let's check out my dog. Come on, Pitanga. Say hi to everybody. They will love it. They will love you. Come on. Oh no. Okay, here she is. This is Pitanga. She's a very tiny dog, and she's super cute, super lovely. And say hi to everybody. So yeah, we could end the stream by bringing my dog onto here. Yeah. Ah! All right. So have a good night, everybody, and we will close it out there. Take care. All right.